Just wanted to let everybody know we're going live right now.
Hi, Erica.
Hi. How are you?
Good. I like your farm sign.
Thank you. I'm hoping I don't get a drop call because I can't find my headset.
Technology. There's a lot of new technology needs.
Yeah, no, I can't find my headphones. The kids aren't home right now, but they will be.
Oh, you know what? It's just a new part of life that we have to do both.
Yeah.
I just closed the door and it all.
Yeah, then I lose reception if I close the door. Hi, Mary.
Right. Seriously, those are the new challenges. Yeah. There's always mute.
Yes. It's a beautiful thing.
Hi, Mary. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks. I managed to eat some quick dinner there.
Good. I had cheese puffs and pistachios.
Roll on your fingers?
I did wash my hands. I washed them a lot lately. I can still do the TikTok moves, you know.
That was pretty good.
Or if we in fact need to create something new.
If I can jump in, having been at the table.
Cindy? Let's see. There you are. Will you let me know when we're ready, Cindy?
Certainly.
Thank you.
I don't think Paul has joined yet. Oh, there he is.
Let's see. Here we are. Cindy, how are we doing? Are we?
I was waiting for Paul to join.
Okay, I see him here, but not on the video. Here
There he is.
Here he is. Okay, very good. Does that get us started?
You may begin.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'd like to welcome everybody to the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting. This is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. I need to read a special paragraph relating to remote meetings. In accordance with Executive Orders N-25-20, N-29-20, and guidance from the California Department of Public Health on gatherings, remote public participation is allowed. We will address the order in the following ways. Members of the public may not physically attend meetings. The City Council meeting will be live streamed on Comcast Channel 28 and on the city's website, barring technical difficulties. Those members of the public wishing to participate must do so remotely via Zoom electronic meetings in the following ways. By either logging onto the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda, please download the app to your computer or mobile device and enter the meeting ID, or by calling a listed number and enter the meeting ID. Public comment for City Council meetings will be accepted via email to publiccomment@cityofsthelena.org. And now I will call on Ms. Nixon, Assistant to the City Manager, to highlight how public participation will be received.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting. For the folks who are joining via Zoom for public participation during the meeting, you can either press *9 on your phone to raise your hand during public comment. For those joining from an iPad, you can, at the top of the iPad, there's a raise hand feature. And then for those joining from a computer, you can use the raise hand feature down on the bottom portion of your screen. Again, the mayor will recognize raised hands during the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now we're going to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask everybody to mute their microphones. Place your hand over your heart, and you may remain seated and repeat after me or with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll move now into our roll call.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Here.
Councilmember Chateau,
Here.
Knudsen,
Here.
Koberstein.
Here.
Very good. We'll move now into our public forum. This is where members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern, not on the agenda during this public forum. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas. But in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Ms. Nixon, is there anybody in our queue for public comment?
Yes, we do have people who are in the queue, so I will start the unmuting people. Just give me 1 second here. All right. This person should be unmuted right now. Please state your name.
Lester Hardy, Mayor Ellsworth, members of the City Council. I've been thinking a lot the last several weeks, as I'm sure everyone has, about issues of racial injustice and the call for social justice that's echoed across the country. And I think in particular, I ask myself, what does that mean here in St. Helena? And my thoughts have gone back repeatedly to the immigration raid of September 8th, 1992. I was on the council at that time. Some of you may remember, some may not. But that raid was conducted by the INS at the request of St. Helena's police chief, with the participation of the police department and deputy sheriffs. I don't know that the sweep itself of public spaces would have been so controversial, but Police Chief West provided the INS with the addresses of 10 residences in the city. suggesting that they be searched as he had some reason to believe illegal immigrants might live in them. It was these warrantless searches that set our Hispanic community on fire. It would be hard to overstate the consternation that ensued. And in response to conversations that I had, I think in particular with Father Brankel, I asked the City Council to conduct an investigation, to hold a meeting at which members of the Hispanic community could talk to us about what had happened. As Father Brankel wrote in a letter to the editor, the request for a City Council investigation into the local police-initiated Immigration and Naturalization Service raid was met with dismay by the majority of the council. Although the request was presented by Councilman Lester Hardy, his peers thought such a hearing would serve no purpose other than to subject them to more verbal abuse. The council held no such meeting. The meeting that was held, and it was attended by 300 members of our community, was put on and organized by our Catholic parish and Reverend Brankel, who made sure that everything about that forum was bilingual. So I ask myself today, nearly 30 years later, what is it that social justice might mean today for members of our Hispanic community, for the community at large? And I have to say, I don't know. And I really think the quest for social justice here in St. Helena must begin by asking the question, by providing a welcoming place at which members of our Hispanic community can come tell us what life is like here in St. Helena, what their issues are, what their concerns are. And I would suggest that you might look to some of the structural obstacles that exist. You need look no further than your own agenda. These meetings, whether in the now old-fashioned way of a public meeting at Vintage Hall or today's meeting by Zoom and other Zoom meetings, make no provision for Spanish speakers. And I really think that that is essential to making the public space you create with your meetings welcoming for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there any additional public comment?
We do have additional public comment. Give me 1 second here. All right, I'm going to allow this person to speak. Please state your name and you should be unmuted.
Hi, my name is Dave Kearney Brown, and I'm calling in tonight to give some admittedly alarming comments on our global climate emergency. And we're showing up like this at public meetings and giving comments because, well, first let me say I'm a lifelong Napa resident, a member of the steering committee of Napa Climate Now, and a former employee of a business here in St. Helena. But we're showing up because we think it's essential that we acknowledge constantly that we are in the middle of a climate emergency, because it's so easy to go on with our lives as if we were not participating in, witnessing, and ultimately waiting for an environmental catastrophe. Scientists are telling us that we have until 2030 to make dramatic reductions in our emissions of greenhouse gases. But there are two terrifying realities about even that startling statement. One is that the news is consistently bad regarding climate change and climate projections. Almost everything is happening faster than was predicted by the models. And as the models are fine-tuned, more often than not, the fine-tuning leads to even more catastrophic projections. The second terrifying reality is that so far there have been no intentional reductions in emissions, though governments worldwide have pledged to implement measures that will achieve such reductions. Last year, 2019, saw the greatest amount of human-generated emissions in history. To repeat, one, the problem is worse than we imagined, and as we see it in finer detail, it is worse than we probably could have imagined. Two, from a net emission standpoint, we have done nothing to solve the problem. There's many examples of the first, and I could have shared any number I've been reading about, but let's consider a report that is truly harrowing to contemplate. A study by a group of scientists that was published several weeks ago considered the climate emergency from a different perspective, that of the human habitat, or the kind of environment in which humans have historically lived. Their findings blew them away because according to the climate projections, 3 billion people will live in areas that will be so hot as to be uninhabitable for human beings. And this will happen by 2070. So we are in the middle of a climate emergency, which leads us to our reason to start freaking out. Number two, we have done nothing to solve the problem. I want to get local for this one. In the last couple of weeks, the Napa County Bike Coalition proposed the Slow Streets Initiative for the city of Napa. And I want to give a shout out to the Bike Coalition. This was brave, this is courageous, amazing, an amazing step forward. A measure that has been adopted in many communities successfully around the country to promote walking and biking. It costs next to nothing, promotes healthy living, and most importantly, for our discussion here, provides a concrete and measurable reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The chapter ended sadly and disappointed many. The proposal was not approved by the Napa City Council. But it is an example, I bring it up here because it is an example of the monthly, weekly, daily discussions that we need to be having about concrete and productive solutions to this emergency, not just one solution, but as many solutions as we can talk about and imagine. These changes must happen, and they will have to happen. And I bring it up here because St. Helena could be the leader in Napa County in initiating real on-the-ground solutions. So I thank you for your attention and consideration, and thank you for making climate change as much a part of every one of your decisions as more traditional concerns such as money and law. It is time, and as we just heard, it well may be past time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any additional public comment, Ms.?
Yes, we do have additional comment. All right, this person should be unmuted.
Good evening again. I beg your indulgence, Mike Hackett again. I've been with you about the last 3 weeks. Certainly I see St. Helena as at the real tipping point, the real key of how you go forward for its existence. Is it going to look like Napa? Is it going to look like Calistoga? Is it going to look like Yountville? I don't think the citizens there want that at all. We are all interested in understanding the connection between local finance and land use. We just heard about the climate crisis we are in, with ever-increasing rates of growth necessary to sustain long-term liabilities. The local units of government in St. Helena are thinking about selling your land for enhanced revenues, of course, but that enhances new growth. But who assumes the long-term liability for these developments? It's the city. It won't cost you anything initially. In fact, you're going to get $20 million. But later, the long-term liability of maintenance, the sewer, the water, the roads at all ages, and your land will be gone. Short-term benefits and massive long-term costs, especially to the environment. I talked about what you need is a diversity of economy, some new ideas. You are a progressive town, full of money, full of smart people. Let's not sell off your assets for the short-term gain. I would repeat again what I said last week when PUC was going to monetize their assets and sell off their land. They would have gotten a whole lot of money, and then it would have been gone forever. But instead, the economy and Saver Langwin stopped it. They thank us now. During that period of time, as I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to talk to the executive director of endowment for Stanford University. When Leland Stanford bestowed that land for the school, he said no sale of lands. That same executive director would always say, once you're shrinking, you're dying. You should be gaining land, not selling land. I believe there are incredible ideas out there. Someone sent me one today about a local economy preservation funding group, much like an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, wherein the city would go into some situation where we'd share. But I think the smartest thing to do is to lease your land and not sell a thing, and do not overbuild hotels or you'll be chasing the monkey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon, is there additional public comment?
Yes, there is additional public comment. The next caller is, I believe, calling in from a phone. So I'm going to allow this person to speak.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Lori Stelling, and I'm a member of Napa Climate Now and a resident of Napa, calling in tonight to talk to you about our climate emergency, as Dave did. It feels really good to connect with the St. Helena community tonight, even though this is virtual, because I served as your recreation supervisor under Kathy Carrick from 2000 to 2006, and I'll always feel connected to your community. I've been working on local climate action for several years now, and in January of 2019, I spoke at a Napa County Board of Supervisors meeting about the importance of taking swift and steady action on climate solutions, because I felt compelled to speak on behalf of my then 11-year-old, now 13-year-old son, and all of the children and youth too young to advocate for themselves, yet who will be directly impacted by our action or lack of action within this very decade. I was reflecting then, and I continue to reflect now. If we adults don't act now on the climate crisis, what will I say to my son a year or two from now when he understands the full depth of the climate emergency before us? And if I were running youth and teen recreation programs in St. Helena today, what could I possibly tell the youth were our reasons for not taking immediate action to save their future? And I don't ask myself these questions to perpetuate a sense of hopelessness or despair, because I do believe that if we act now, we will have a significant impact on the crisis. But I reflect on the youth to help me to remember what really matters, the preciousness of life, and to keep me on track, because time is ticking, right? We already know that the special report on global warming issued by the IPCC in October 2018 and the fourth National Climate Assessment issued in November 2018 laid out the truth based upon science of our current global predicament. We must make difficult, swift, smart, innovative changes which cool the planet and land us at net zero carbon emissions by 2030 if we're going to have a livable future. And I believe we can do this work together. I applaud the formation of our Regional Climate Action Committee, but we cannot wait any longer to act. We must stop polluters, change our building codes, protect our forests, turn our construction debris and food waste into local energy, implement climate-smart alternatives to burning, ask wineries to work together to create eco-shuttle services for their guests. The list is long, but again, I do believe that we can do this. And I'm here tonight just to really urge you to prioritize addressing climate emergency as you never have before, for the welfare of all of life and for the children and youth in our care in particular. 17-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg reminds us, the eyes of all future generations are upon you. May we feel the weight of our responsibility in a real way now, that we may get into real action. Thank you so much for your time. I really do care about your community.
Thank you. Thank you for the public comment. Ms. Nixon, is there
We do
any
have-
additional public?
Yes, there is. Hold on one second. All right, go ahead and speak. You should be able to be unmuted.
Hi, my name is Carlota Sainato, and I'm the program coordinator at the Napa County Bicycle Coalition, a local nonprofit dedicated to making riding a bicycle in Napa County safe, accessible, and convenient for riders of all ages and abilities. I wanted to express the Bicycle Coalition's gratitude to City Council for awarding our organization a programmatic grant in the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 budget to provide a safe streets program in St. Helena. We're greatly appreciative of the council's decision to fund this program, and we're looking forward to working with the community to improve road safety for all users. It's certainly an appropriate time for our Safe Streets program to get started, as more and more people are taking to the road on foot and bikes for recreation and commuting during the shelter-in-place orders. We were thrilled at the positive results we saw last year when working on St. Helena's Walk and Roll to School Month with local partners, especially at the elementary school level, where active transportation use increased from roughly 30% to over 70%. We hope to continue this trend community-wide with our Safe Streets program and support St. Helena in growing as a bike-friendly community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Nixon, is there additional public comment?
Yes, there is additional public comment. The person should be unmuted. Should be able to speak now.
Hi, yes, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth and Council. My name is Letty Olivier, and I am a lifelong local, and I do reside in St. Helena. And I want to read a few excerpts from a letter to the editor I noticed in the Register yesterday. And as I was reading it, I thought, oh, yay, someone's talking about our town. But, you know, what was fascinating to me, well, I'm going to read first, and then I'll talk a few seconds after that. So I'm reading from someone's letter and from a Bill Cofield in Napa. I remember some of the articles in the Napa Valley Register about how could Napa get some of the tourists to stop here and not all go to St. Helena. Well, they figured it out, and now you have what we have today: a crowded mess, high-priced restaurants, and stores that most locals can't afford to go to. Now, with all of the hotels and restaurants, there are lots of low-paying jobs, and the people who work cannot afford to live here. Now we're trying to build low-cost housing for them. It's like a monkey chasing his tail. The commute traffic is a joke. It's hard to even get around town. And if you're trying to go out of town, you better pick the right time or you'll be stuck in the awful traffic that's bad for our environment. And I'm skipping some portions because you don't need to, you can read it yourselves. It's in the Register yesterday. He goes on to say, stop building hotels and more tourist attractions, and you won't need all the low-cost housing, and maybe develop back to a community again. Being reliant on the tourist tax dollar has burned Napa in the past. The recession, the earthquake, the fires, and now this pandemic. It'll happen again someday, and the good people of Napa will pay for it. I sincerely hope after this pandemic is over that our city leaders will wake up and realize that having all your eggs in one basket isn't such a good idea. And that was a Bill Cofield from Napa. Actually, it turns out I know him. We've worked in the past together, but I just couldn't believe that in reading his letter, it resonated with me because it very much struck the chord that is exactly the kind of town I'm living in and I have been living in. And yes, I've been busy raising and building my career and raising my child and supporting him. But I just wanted to take a minute and say, I hope and simply ask you that all decisions moving forward are fully vetted for our long-term resiliency and not for our short-term immediate needs for revenue. I know we are in a massive crisis that none of us foresaw affecting us in our community. I just simply wanted to let you know that as a lifelong local, and I know I'll be here for many more years to come, I ask that you pause and proceed cautiously with further development of hotels and expensive stores that we locals can't afford. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Nixon, are there additional comments?
Yes, there are. Hold on one second. Okay, you should be unmuted.
Good evening, Nancy Durbin here. The Civic Infrastructure Task Force report estimated 4 to 7 years before identified hotel projects could be up and running. However, Ted Hull anticipates opening the lodging at Farmstead in 2022. He forecasts over $2 million annually in tax revenue to the city, and that doesn't include on and off-site sales tax. Also, the task force made hotel revenue estimates based on 70 to 80% occupancy rates. But over the last 8 years, our average occupancy rate is 62.8%, with the weakest year a mere 58% and the strongest a modest 66%. So projections of 70 to 80% are likely unobtainable and paint an overly optimistic picture for potential revenue. With the pandemic, 2020 is on track to be the most dismal year yet. But thankfully, hotels are opening for business, except for Los Alcobos, which isn't expected to open until August 1st. That leaves St. Helena's premier luxury hotel completely vacant during what is typically the busiest month of the year. That doesn't bode well when making projections regarding luxury development in the future. We, the people of St. Helena, have been told we need to decide what we want in order to go forward. Well, we did decide. The following comes from the visioning completed in 2009. Adams Street should retain public open areas within the property that serve as amenities for residents and visitors. These include a plaza, amphitheater, and community garden. The central courtyard, located between the civic uses and library expansion, should serve as the town's outdoor living room with benches, seating, and tree planters. A plaza at the corner of Adams and Library Lane will serve as an attractive entrance to the property and be visually inviting to attract people from downtown. Design recommendations for the existing vineyard include protecting views from the library to the hillside by maintaining the area as open space and maintain the northwestern portion of the property to be used as a productive vineyard. Hotel development had no part of that vision. We made another decision in October of 2016 at a town hall meeting. 4 responses to RFPs for the development of the Adams Street and City Hall properties were given. Over 100 people in a standing room only fire hall that day listened to the hotel proposals, and the overwhelming sentiment was no, this is not what we want. It's been almost 4 years to the day since that great firehouse fiasco, and now Councilmember Koberstein is asking us to support issuing, once again, RFPs for hotel development on Adams Street. We've been there and we've done that. We didn't want it then, and I don't think we want it now. Ms. Koberstein, you have said we need to stop the endless debate and make
the point of personal
that you and whomever else is behind the hotel development idea seem unwilling to accept the notion that for a great many people, Adams Street has a higher purpose for our community than a luxury hotel. There are responsible ways to generate enough money for the city of St. Helena. We don't need to sell off Adams Street just because it would generate more money. With 19 weeks to Election Day, we can see what happens in November and go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there a just Ms. Koberstein, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just like to raise a point of order and a point of personal privilege. That public comment is not intended to be used in this manner. I can't respond to what was said about me, but I don't think that we should permit public commenters to be singling out 1 or 2 council members during public comment in this fashion.
Well, I'll note your comments.
Yeah, take a look at our parliamentary rules, please. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, Ms. Nixon, do we have additional comment?
I'm not seeing any additional public comment.
Okay, very good. We will then move to reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. Tonight, I'm going to start. I just have a few comments I want to begin with. In first, recognizing that we are still in a state of emergency related to COVID-19. And as we are encouraged by our reopening, both of businesses and activities for the community, that health workers have really let me know that the wearing of masks, face coverings, social distancing, and limited gatherings are really important to keep the curve where we can manage it. So the benefits of reopening, we all can see that, and if we want to continue on this path, we just want to remind the community about the face coverings, the social distancing, and the limiting of gatherings. And then I have a comment also on our coming up on July 16th. We are going to have a public meeting regarding our police policies and procedures. And this will be an important conversation. We're seeking public opinion. We are going to do a review. Our police department and police chief have been very open about wanting this to happen, and we're very proud of their stance in promoting a treatment of all people equally and nonviolent approach to what we do. The discussion, I believe, will lead to the recognition that Black Lives Matter in St. Helena and Napa County, and that racial equity is of prime importance here in St. Helena and Napa County. So this discussion is agendized for July 16th, 6 p.m. It will be a Zoom meeting, and we encourage public input before that meeting. So these were two important issues I just wanted to bring up to remind folks of the COVID-19 protocol, and then also our upcoming police policy and procedure review, which will lead to further steps in how we discuss racial equity in St. Helena and Napa County for all that live or visit here. So with that, I'm going to move now to our reports, and I will ask first our city attorney, Ms. Ueda, if there's anything to report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have anything to report tonight.
Very good. I will move now to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Just a reminder that on July 8th, we will be holding a special meeting at 4 p.m. to discuss the city's, 3 p.m. to discuss the city's goals and work plan for 2020. That will be a special meeting. And then secondly, I will be out of the office after the conclusion of tonight's meeting, returning to the office on July 8th. In my absence, Maya DeRosa, our Plan and Building Director, will be our acting city manager.
Thank you. And our Finance Director, Ms. Mitz.
Mayor, council members, thank you. I just wanted to provide an update to everybody on our business assistance program. So as of last Thursday at 5 p.m., we do have 9 applications totaling $180,000. I am currently working with 2 local loan experts, and we're in the process of reviewing those 9 applications, and we will have a determination by Thursday, if not early Friday morning. We will be notifying every applicant whether it's approved or denied and the dollar amount. So we'll be contacting them. And then also just a reminder that we still do have funding available. And the second review period, the applications need to be in by this Thursday at 5 p.m. All the information is available on the city's website. So if you go to the front page of the website, on the on the left-hand side, it says Business Spotlight. There's a hyperlink. Just click on that spot, and then all the information will be pulled up from there. And you can access the document, which is a fill-inable form.
Thank you very much. And now we will move to our city clerk, Mr. Shafopoulos.
Nothing to report.
And our Public Works, Ms. Smithies.
Nothing to report.
Our Planning and Building with Ms. DeRosa.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
And do we have somebody on from our police or fire? Seeing no comment, we will move on now to our council members. Mr. Knudsen.
I was hoping that perhaps Ms. DeRosa could talk a little bit about the zoning update. But if she doesn't want to, that's perfectly fine. I also wanted to speak about two things for the Parks and Rec Department. If Andre is not on, Andre's on. Andre, maybe you could talk about both the tennis courts and the open space and walking trails if you'd like. I don't want to take thunder away from staff.
Sure. Actually, thank you, Councilman Knudsen. If you don't mind, I'll let you talk about the walking trails and open spaces. That is a committee that you serve on with our Parks Commission. When it comes to the tennis courts, what I can speak to is just the use of the high school tennis courts that the city has in its public use agreement with the high school. Those courts are open from about 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. And at the moment, it is limited to singles use only, and that is per our agreement with the high school. But those courts are available for public use, and there should be no problem accessing those courts. We have had a porta potty installed out there, so that'll make it more convenient for those players to go out to play. And parking can be done on the street or in the parking area that leads back to Crane Park right off of Grayson there, where the baseball field is. If I may, Councilman Knudsen also add in there that we are going to be doing our bike parade on July 4th. That'll start at 10 a.m. It is free. Pre-registration is required, and you can do that at our website. We are beginning to post information on social media as well. Also, Front Yard 4th is proceeding, and we have Pizzeria Trevina already on board. We have a couple other restaurants that are getting us information so that they can participate. And that is the community's opportunity to participate in our campaign to support local businesses on that holiday. So if you are thinking of doing a barbecue, or you're thinking about bringing in a meal as opposed to cooking it yourself, contact one of the businesses listed on our Front Yard 4th list, and they should have either some specials going or a takeout menu that you would be able to take advantage of. And even if they're not listed on our Front Yard 4th, any local business that you can support on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th of July would be greatly appreciated. And David, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Andre. Great job in developing that program. Anytime there's a bike parade through town, it's a good day. And the informal high school graduation bike parade with all the graduates wearing their caps and gowns was incredible and very community building. And I hope that becomes a tradition in the future as well, and appreciate your substitutable July 4th celebrations. And then finally, just the open space and walking trails proposal, which the subcommittee had worked on for 6 months and then sort of got sidelined because of COVID. It's based on output from the general plan and from the pedestrian plan that was approved by the City Council several years ago. And that was approved 5-0 by the Parks and Rec Commission with a staff report that will come to council. And I think it's pretty straightforward and also based on other things that we as a community and as a council have felt comfortable supporting in the past. So I'm hoping we can move forward with that. And then Ms. DeRosa, if you want to talk about the zoning code update or not, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
I'm happy to provide just a quick soundbite on where we are. So, we had a May 5th joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Council and went over the stakeholder input. And since that time, the consultant, Lisa Weiss Consulting, prepared a very comprehensive document that's a recommendations memo of where it's kind of a guidepost of where we go from here. And it included an annotated outline. So there's a small group of us here at the city that have reviewed that document. Actually, we got the comments off to them today. And we are talking about having a possible meeting on August 13th, which would be a virtual open house, if you will, for the community, and then a special planning commission meeting on that day as well, like an hour later. So stay tuned. There'll be more details to come. There's some things I'm still coordinating to work out to make sure that date, but we think it will be a great opportunity to get public input. And prior to that, I am working with a consultant on some additional targeted outreach to the community. So more to come on that. We'll be amplifying that on our website and through some press releases. So I hope that was helpful.
Thanks. Was.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Ms. Chateau.
Hi, yes. I wanted to see if there would be council support for that idea. I'd be very much in favor of looking at in the future when we can, how we can provide and make sure that we can look at Spanish services. I think that this moment calls for being more sensitive to make sure that all of our community is included. And I loved hearing that idea earlier from Lester Hardy, and just thinking through how do we make sure that we are inclusive in our communication, knowing that we probably are not going to translate everything, but I'm sure that there are things that we could do to improve.
Support that. I think maybe during our goal setting session, we can talk a little bit about procedures and protocols generally going forward.
I thought that too. If there was support for that, that would be great.
Very good. And then Ms. Koberstein.
I have nothing.
And Mr. Doring.
Nothing. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I want to acknowledge from public comment that it is, it's out of order to, calling out council members individually. I want to acknowledge that. I do want to say that in the Zoom setting here, sometimes there's a disconnect in terms of being able to see exactly what's going on in the situation. So I do want to acknowledge Ms. Koberstein's point, and I think that she's correct in making that. So with that, I want to remind the public that it's not appropriate to individually call out city council members. Your comments are welcome, but there's a certain decorum that we need to keep. Anyway, so moving on from that, my comment, I just want to circle back. I'm very encouraged in terms of the reopening, the idea that we're looking forward to this drive-in movie theater. We're looking forward to 4th of July. With the summer comes fire season, comes the concern with open flame, with fireworks, even if they're illegal. Sometimes folks use them. We want to discourage that, and we want to keep folks on their toes, even in this COVID situation, that we are also entering fire season. Those simple things that we talk about, having a family plan, having a communication with your neighborhood, having a go bag ready, having 2 to 3 days of non-perishable food and water. So even as we're dealing with all these other things, we need to remember these basics about being prepared during fire season. So with that, then, those are my comments, and thank you. We'll move now to the staff briefing, and we'll have item 7.1. This is an update on our wastewater treatment plant by Ms. Smithies.
Thank you. I don't need to go too much farther, but since there is an item on the consent agenda for one big moving forward for this item, which is CEQA, but the other item is the package plant RFP we talked about, the actual manufacture of the package plant portion of the project. We coordinated, the consultant Hydroscience and I coordinated with our city attorney last week and discussed a way to move forward with identifying the specifications and details for the package plant that we need to meet our CDO requirements, our cease and desist order requirements of the state, and which means we could build that specification into the design bid specs and not have to go to a separate RFP process. And the USDA, we followed up the USDA last week, and they concurred that was an approach that they would be allowable with financing the project still. There was concern that if you spec it out so detailed, you're really making it a sole source, but there is a way to do a broader search, and if the manufacturer can meet that specification, then fine. So that's my only update right now. Design proceeds, and then you have an item on the consent agenda to move CEQA and NEPA forward, which is the environmental. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move to item 7.2. This is our Upper York Creek Dam project update, also by Ms. Smithies.
We have a large update already on old business, so I don't want to take too much time on this, but I do want to inform that We are one permit shy of getting this project in groundbreaking, and it's the cultural Section 106 consultation with the Army Corps. But we are almost there, and we saw the draft agreement update from the Army Corps with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and so we're very close, and we're hopeful that we'll have a permit very soon for the Army Corps.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll move on to our consent calendar. My understanding is that we will be pulling item 8.8. This is the budget item. And I'm going to read through the items. If there's any other consent item that folks would like pulled, please let me know, either from the council or from the community online here. So we have item 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, and we're pulling item 8.8. Is there a motion to, seeing none pulled other than 8.8, is there a motion to pass the consent calendar other than 8.8?
So moved.
Second. Oh,
You can have it, Anna.
okay, I'll take this one. Second.
Vice Mayor
And a
Doring.
roll call.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau.
Yes.
Knudsen.
Yes.
Oberstein.
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, so now we will move on to item 8.8. This was pulled, and this is the consideration and approval of a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2020-21 budget. And Ms. Mitz, our finance director.
Great, thank you. I will be sharing my, I will need to be able to share my screen, Priya. Great, thank you very much. So before you tonight is the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget for adoption. And I wanted to do a quick walkthrough on our budget preparation timeline. As everyone is well aware, with COVID, it was like none other that we've ever had to prepare before. So a quick timeline of what we've done. On April 14th, we did present our preliminary revenue loss forecast for both fiscal year 1920 as well as 2021. On May 14th, we held our first budget workshop. And at this workshop, we established budget priorities. We established a balanced budget framework to allow us to be able to move forward in creating the budget. And we had the initial presentation of a draft long-range financial forecast. At that meeting, we were asked by council members to present a few more scenarios, which we'll be presenting later on in tonight's meeting. On May 28th, we held our second budget workshop. And at that time, we did review the water and wastewater funds. We reviewed the CIP projects. And then we also did review the Chamber of Commerce tentative contract, which was just approved in the consent items. And then on June 9th, that's when we presented the draft fiscal year 2021 budget to City Council for feedback. We did receive some feedback on that meeting, and we've incorporated that feedback in the proposed budget that's in front of you tonight. And the next slide, I am going to turn that over to City Manager Presswich.
Thank you. We'll go to a few other numbers in just a moment, but just the council budget priorities. This is a short list of the budget priorities that have guided the entire process over the last month and a half. And I think the budget that you're receiving tonight meets each of these budget priorities and reflects the council's feedback throughout this entire process. On our next slide, pause for a second. Our next slide, this is the balanced budget framework that the council established for us at the beginning on April 14th. This has been a guiding guidepost for us as we worked to identify budget reductions, target the use of general fund reserves, secure labor strategies, and also identify options for new revenue. And I'm pleased to let everyone know tonight that we've secured tentative agreements with all of our labor groups What these do is these concessions essentially help us balance the budget for 2021. And it's through the cooperation of our own bargaining units and our employees that helped make that happen. And I'm very grateful for that. Additionally, the council deployed a voluntary retirement incentive program, and we have 2 employees that will be taking advantage of that program. That's also helped us balance. And in addition to that, the state of California has provided $75,000 in COVID relief that we've been able to incorporate into the budget. So just a summary to let you know that the framework has largely been adhered to in the development of this budget.
Is this where, Ms. Smith, you have
We're good for a couple more slides.
Yes, sorry, I was having problems trying to find my unmute. So the brief summary of the general fund. So the modifications from the June 9th meeting until today, there was only 2 real modifications that were done to the budget. So the beginning fund balance, we did reduce the beginning fund balance for the general fund reserves by $185,000. This was authorized through one was the use of additional general fund revenues or general fund reserves of $100,000 for the small business sustainability loan program. So actually upping that dollar amount to $300,000. There was additional use of reserves for the Cameo to help support the drive-in movie theater, which I do have to put a little plug out for them. I believe this Thursday is when they're actually opening. So it's something they're moving forward with that's very exciting for us. And then the last part is use of additional funds in the current fiscal year that we have to do to accommodate for the reopening of city facilities. So this is for additional disinfectant for your hands, for the guards that are put up. So we had to use some additional funding to be able to compensate for that. So that reduced our overall general fund beginning balance by $185,000. The other item that we did adjust was the use of park impact fees. That was a discussion item at the June 9th meeting. So we did restore $75,000 of park impact fees. What we did is we did a little more research, and we do have 2 types of park impact fees that we use. The first, is a park in lieu fee, and the second one is the park impact fees. And the park in lieu fee is basically monitored, and the way you can use it, it falls under the Quimby Act, where the park impact fees falls under the Mitigation Act. So under the Quimby Act, the uses that we had identified in the budget were acceptable uses. However, since both of those fees are put into one particular fund, to err on the side of caution, what city staff did was actually back out the use of the impact fees. And then what we were able to do is at the beginning of every budget cycle, we have asked staff members and department heads when they submit their budgets to present 5 and 10% cut scenarios. So what we did is we went back through the other cut scenarios, and we identified a few other cuts that we could make that basically allowed us to restore the $75,000. So with those modifications, the net position from the general fund, you'll see the estimated fund balance is $5.9 million, and before it was a little over $6 million. We have our revenue strategies, so that brings us the estimated final of $11.4 million. Our expenses of $13.1 million, the use of reserves of $1.7 million, and then the estimated fund balance of $4.2 million, which brings us to a 32% reserve level in the general fund. For the water fund, there were not any substantial changes made. The only change that you'll see is we have identified the total amount of transfers to capital. So the water fund, we start at $3.4 million as the balance, revenues of $6.8, expenses of almost $2 million, transfers to capital of $540,000. So those funds are being transferred out of operations right into the CIP funds for water projects. Revenue less expenses. So we're showing the net expense or net revenues of $135,000. Leaves us our estimated fund balance of almost $3.4 million for 54% reserve level. And then the net position for the wastewater fund, again, that didn't change either. The only change factor in here is that we added the transfers to capital. So we start out with $2.5 million. The revenues are just shy of $3.4 million. expenses 2.7, transfers to capital 520,000. So we have net revenues of 122,000 in the wastewater fund, estimated fund balance of 2.6 million, which leaves us at 81%. And again, part of that 2.6 million is the 1.15 million that we've received for a settlement, that during the next fiscal year, we will be taking an item to City Council to transfer that over into the CIP projects for wastewater. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions on the budget, the proposed budget document.
Okay, very good. I'm going to first open it up to council comment and question, then we'll open the public comment. Is there any initial comment or question from the council? Seeing none, I have one question. Is when do we get our next sales tax report?
We should receive our next sales tax report towards the end of June, and that will be for sales tax in May. We have not received that yet.
Okay, very good. So with that, I'm going to open it to public comment. I know that we have one letter that came in that requested to be read, so we'll allow that. Is there anybody in the queue for public comment at this point?
I'm not seeing anyone in the queue with a raised hand right now. I can go ahead and read the public comment that was sent in, and then I can look and see if there are any hands.
Okay, very good.
All right, this letter is from Mark Smithers. I'm really concerned with the lack of transparency that is apparent with the agenda item for the fiscal year 2021 budget. As you know, I do have an issue with the budget calling for a reduction to existing staff wages while we forecast to end fiscal year 2021 with a 32% reserve, above our goal and above what the California League of Cities suggests. Additionally, there are funds that can be moved back to the general fund from non-restricted funds, and now we should consider returning some of the 1.6 million moved from the general fund to the water fund a couple years ago, given the updated budget related to York Creek and the water department's 54% forecasted revenues. But here's the transparency issue. Notice came out on Thursday, June 18th, that the City Council agenda and no budget as an agenda item. On Friday, June 19th, the agenda was updated. See Cindy's note contained in the email below with item 10.2 old business added for the budget and staff report forthcoming. However, no notice of an amendment was sent out. And now Monday, June 22nd, the budget agenda item has been moved to consent item 8.8 and staff report added requiring no presentation and no discussion. However, again, no notice of an amendment to the agenda. Very disappointing. I request that this be read aloud at the City Council meeting of June 23rd, 2020. Mark Smithers.
Thank you.
And I am not seeing any additional raised hands for this item.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think, I don't know when to bring it up, but I think at some point we have to have a discussion about sort of protocol related to Zoom meetings and letters submitted and read, that sort of thing. So I think at some point we'll have to have that fairly soon, probably, just to have clarity. So with that, and seeing no further public comment, I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. Are there any questions or comments at this point? Ms. Chateau.
I just wanted to say that I think that this is a good and balanced strategy that's going to help us get through the next couple of years. I think that there's so many unknowns that we might be a little bit higher over the reserves, but there's just really big amounts that could be hitting us as a city. And so I have been very appreciative of the approach that we're taking and the holistic view of everything that we're looking at. And I do think it's fair and balanced. And I'm super appreciative of our employees and how they've come together back and come up with something that to me that feels very fair and balanced.
Thank you. Additional comment? I will echo, Mr. Doring.
I will echo what you're about to echo. I'm much appreciative of our employees for working with the city, understanding the difficult positions we were in and trying to get a balanced budget. I just wanted a clarification, maybe after you make your comments, but a clarification to staff on the $75,000 that will not be coming from impact fees. I just want to make it clear that we are still allocating $75,000 to do the necessary maintenance that continues to come up in our community, correct?
That is correct. We are still utilizing the 75,000. We're just changing the funding source.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So yes, I would like to echo Councilperson Chateau and Vice Mayor Doring in thanking our staff for their incredible work over these last few months, the incredible work of Mr. Prestwich and the Finance Department in putting this budget together that I think is very balanced and in a remarkable circumstance we're able to find solutions to keep us moving forward, to keep our reserves in a strong place because we don't know what's coming next. And also I hope giving our staff and our employees the understanding that we care very deeply about them as well and want to all move forward together. So I just want to echo that thanks. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will close this item and, I'm sorry, Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, to me, I also want to echo some thanks, but it's really about maintaining service to our residents. The last time the city faced this 10 plus years ago, 12 plus years ago, we really reduced service levels and it was not welcomed in the community. So I want to appreciate the hard work to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Koberstein?
I think I just want to second what everybody said. I think everybody has to realize we were working to try to fulfill multiple objectives and council goals at once. And I think that the staff, particularly the people who were leading this effort, did a good job of presenting us with options and really developing the path that we use to get where we are. So thank you. And thank you to our staff generally. We all appreciate what you've done.
Thank you. So with that, I will ask for a motion on this item 8.8, if there is a motion.
I move that we pass consent item 8.8.
Second.
Don't we have to adopt the resolution?
That's the recommended action.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like me to say it again? That way, I move that we approve the recommended action for consent item 8.8.
Second.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, now we're moving a few items up earlier. We're going to do first the vote on our reappointing of applicants for our active transportation Sustainability Committee, our Planning Commission, our Parks and Recreation Commission, and our Library Board of Trustees. And then after that, we'll move on to our COVID update from Mr. Prestwich, and Dr. Wilson, I believe, is here for that as well. So we'll do item 11.1. And as I said, this is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing applicants to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and Library Board of Trustees, and consider leaving the recruitment open for the unfilled terms of office until filed. This is Cindy Giaffopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We held a special interview applicant meeting earlier this evening, and I've tallied the votes. And for Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Glenn Smith was reappointed. For the Library Board of Trustees, Susan Swan and Emily Armstead were reappointed. For the Planning Commission, Autumn Anderson was reappointed. And for the Parks and Recreation Commission, Susan Kenward and Ty Taylor had the most votes. And so now it's appropriate for council to consider, discuss, and call for a motion.
So with that, are there any initial council comments or questions? Mr. Knudsen?
We need more folks for ATSC. So if anyone's listening and would like to participate, please, and also for the library board. I know it's challenging times with COVID, but we really rely on your input, and both are very important boards for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shafopoulos, did you have a comment?
Yes, and staff also recommends keeping the recruitment open for those unfilled positions. So, and actually I received an application already for Parks and Rec, not Parks and Rec, Library. And I anticipate going back to council on July 14th with a recommendation of appointment.
Okay. Is there additional council comment or question at this point? So I'm going to open it to public comment. Is there any public comment at this point?
I am looking to see if there's any people with raised hands, and I am not seeing any at this time.
Okay, very good. I will close public comment. I will bring it back. And any further council comments, question? So I too, very thankful for those who stepped up or stepped forward and want to keep encouraging folks in our community to do so. So with that, I see the staff recommends adopting a resolution appointing the applicants. And Cindy, I'm trying to understand the time frame that you just brought up.
Oh, no, I just asked for staff recommendation to keep the recruitments open until the vacancies have been filled.
Okay, very good. So is there a motion on this item? Are we, I'm trying to understand are we keeping the complete thing open until further notice, or are we passing what we have?
So my recommendation is to appoint the folks that I had mentioned earlier, and then also to keep the recruitments open for the unfilled positions.
Okay, so we'll need a motion on that here.
So moved.
And a second? I will second it.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Ms. Koberstein, did we get a yes?
Sorry, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to our old business, item 10.1. This is City Manager update on COVID-19 emergency, discussion and direction regarding anticipated reopening of city amenities and associated protocols. And this is Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I want to speak about two items and then also turn it over to our school superintendent for an update on schools. Today, the County of Napa passed a tenant protection ordinance that applies to both residential and commercial property. The ordinance was approved unanimously and applies both in the county and in the cities. It does include a provision to opt out if a city would like to. And secondly, you may have noticed that the college parking lot was used over the past 2 days for COVID testing. That's the first time that testing occurred in St. Helena. All of the slots for reservations were taken, and so that's good news because that meant a lot of people locally were able to get tested in St. Helena today. So that's an update, and unless there are any questions about those two issues, I'll turn it over to our school superintendent, Dr. Mary Lee Wilson, for an update on how the COVID pandemic is impacting our local school system.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, City Council members, City Manager Prestwich, for allowing me to speak with you this evening about our schools. I believe all of us know that our 4 schools in St. Helena are an important aspect of the city and the community. We never believed on March 13th when I closed schools for 2 weeks that we would be in this place where we are today, where we moved into remote learning and celebrated our transitional students, our second graders, our fifth graders, our eighth graders, and our 12th graders with drive-by parades and an individual videotaped graduation for our high schoolers. I do want to celebrate our community and acknowledge the generous commitments on the part of many community members. Again, this year, more than $280,000 was awarded to our high school seniors in local scholarship donations. And that happens every year. With regards to the COVID-19 event, our district staff has been meeting on a regular basis to analyze and process and work with the guidance coming to us from CDE and also our county public health officer. We do have a team we are calling our transition team that's working to align our plans for the new school year with the local neighboring school districts while looking at, as I mentioned, the guidance is being provided. We have a number of committees, an operations and policies committee. We have a wellness committee that's looking at not only physical health of our students and our employees, also the mental health of our students and employees. We have a facilities committee that is looking at PPE, personal protective materials, sanitation of our schools, all of the aspects of facilities. We have a transportation committee looking at our buses and whether or not we can transport students. Our food services committee continues to work to ensure that we can feed our students. Technology committee, and then most important, an instruction committee, which is made up of our principals and teacher leaders and our chief academic officer. They're currently working on instructional models and scenario planning. Those models will include full remote if we need to continue into that full remote. And we've learned lots of lessons from the last number of months. And while some aspects of our remote learning worked well, we know that there's much more that we can improve upon as we move forward if needed. We also are working on a hybrid model, which would work in some fashion where half of the students are at school and half of them are not at school. And that's that whole notion of reducing the amount of students in proximity to each other and is really challenging. And then also a scenario with full day school with safety precautions. Currently on our district website, there are 2 opportunities for members of the community and also our parents to provide us with additional feedback. There is an updated survey for our parents to help us to know what our parents are thinking with regards to safety, and if we are able to hold either a hybrid or a full day program, would they would they elect for their children to come to school, or would they stay home and request remote learning? And then also we have a placeholder on the website to allow any members of the community to either ask questions or provide comments and feedback. We will be addressing all of those questions on July 9th in a live stream YouTube and potentially on channel 27 that will be also videotaped and then posted to the website. We truly do look for input from our community. And then we're continuing to update our community with our website. We have both an active main website and a COVID-19 website that links to lots of documents and support with regards to students and student well-being. We also have emails and text messages and calls to our parents and our community. And finally, I think it's really important to note, we worked diligently to ensure that every one of our students not only had a device, a one-on-one device during the remote learning time period, we also worked to deploy hotspots for some of our families where they did not have internet. At this point, we believe we have one family that we have not been able to get internet to, and satellite and whatnot is required. And so we're still working on that. we have allowed all of our students to keep their devices for the summer and their hotspots so that if there are programs that they want to continue to check, we provided them with a number of websites and opportunities to look at. And then finally, also, food services continues through the summer. We have been delivering meal kits on Mondays and Thursdays from 9:30 to 10:30. And we've given out as many as 200 in a day, and we're averaging now right around 100 per day for those meals. So the families are picking up breakfast and lunch for 3 days on Monday and Thursday. Parents can pick those meals up without their children present. And we do find it to be a really important and valuable service to our community. We did change the location. Previously, it was in front of Vintage Hall. It's now on Grayson, right in front of the high school office. We have lots of work to accomplish in the next few weeks. We intend to work with our governing board in a special meeting on July 24th or sooner to bring forward plans and announce to our community what our next steps are. Thank you, Mr. Presswich. I'm happy to answer any questions if the council has any at this time.
Very good. Thank you for the report. Before I ask for council comment and question, I want to just continue offering my gratitude to Dr. Wilson, to the school district, the stability that you've brought to this community through this unprecedented crisis has been remarkable. The focus and the consistency. I just want to offer my deep gratitude. So with that, then I will open it. Is there any additional comment from the council here or question? Ms. Chateau.
I do. I'll start. Hello, Dr. Wilson. I want to echo the appreciation. My kids are in the school district. I know day in and day out how lucky we are as a family to live in St. Helena because of the fantastic schools that you are leading all of them through. So thank you so much. I've been hearing a lot of questions about what happens in the hybrid model or the full remote for the kids that don't have parents that can stay home with them as we look at a longer period. I think about with harvest coming up, and there's so many parents that both work and work really long hours. And when we do go into a situation with the COVID numbers increasing, they can't be around grandparents. And I didn't know, has there been any conversation with the Boys and Girls Club or what happens in that case? And it's fine too if it's too early to talk about it, but I was curious if you had any other information to share with our community about that.
It is a bit on the early side, and at the same time, please know that we are in communication. We do work in collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club. We were very happy that prior to them opening to the community on June 15th, they were providing some essential daycare for our administrators and secretaries that came back in June to close out the school year. So we have a great relationship with the Boys and Girls Club, and if they are able, I know they will work with us to provide services. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is super challenging for all of our families, especially those where the parents need to work, and if we are in remote and hybrid. And so we are leaning into this, and we are working really diligently to develop plans that can serve our students as best as we possibly can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional council question or comment? Ms. Oberstein?
I just want to speak a minute about the county ordinance that Mark referenced, and I would request, see if there's any concurrence, that we schedule this for discussion and get a report from our city attorney perhaps about it. It wasn't quite clear to me how the county had the jurisdiction to do this. I'm not saying it's a bad concept, but I would like to understand that.
And there was a sort of an agricultural exemption towards the end of the ordinance. I don't know if that remained in the final version, but it wasn't clear to me how that would apply and if it was intended to apply in the city, what it meant. So if anybody else is interested in that discussion, I would like to hear from our city attorney about that at a future meeting.
I would certainly support that as well. This was an item that moved from a slow pace to a very fast pace, and I believe we need more discussion in the city. So I would definitely support that.
Thank you.
Any other comment, question from council? So with that, I'm going to then open to public comment. Ms. Nixon, are we seeing any public comments?
At this time, I am not seeing anyone with a raised hand for public comment.
Okay, very good. So I'll bring it back to the council. And is there any comment, question on this item as we're going forward? Not seeing any. I will once again reiterate what healthcare workers have been consistent in communicating to me, which is wear the dang mask and practice the social distancing and limit the gatherings. It's just been impressed upon me over the last 2 weeks. As we get into reopening, we want to reopen, but let's follow these protocols. So with that, then I will close this item and we will move on now. And thank you again, Dr. Wilson, for being here for this. And we will move now to back to our public hearing, which is item number 9.1. And this is introduction and first reading of an ordinance amending chapter 17.116, section 17.116.030 of the St. Helena Municipal Code to impose new limits on local authority to regulate accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units in compliance with the provisions of government code sections 65852.2 and 65852.22 as amended by recently approved legislation that took effect on January 1st, 2020. The action is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15303. And this is, I have it prepared by Mr. Heacock, our senior planner, but I believe Ms. DeRosa is presenting this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, members of the City Council. Actually, by way of background, at the joint Planning Commission and Council meeting at the beginning of the year in January, we had a legislative update, and there were a number of bills that the city attorney discussed that were coming either recently approved or we could anticipate legislation. And changes to the ADU ordinance had actually just gone into effect. And so we did have a brief discussion of them at that meeting. But obviously this meeting, we are here to formalize what our recommendations are. So I'm pleased to bring you this amended, updated dwelling unit ordinance. It was recommended unanimously for approval by the Planning Commission on May 19th. And further background, so in 2019, the California legislature approved and the governor signed into law a variety of housing bills, and one of them created new limits on the city's authority to regulate accessory dwelling units and also something called junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs. The laws took effect on January 1st, and earlier this year, our department began working with the city attorney's office to create this new ordinance, so we would be in compliance with the new legislation. We've attached a red line of the ordinance to the staff report for your reference. I'll just highlight some of the changes that went into effect in January. There's an updated definition section and some clarifications in there that you'll see. There's a 60-day time frame for the city to act on complete applications. There's a provision that no ADU or JADU may be sold or otherwise conveyed separately from a primary residence. An ADU created after January 1st, 2020 is not subject to any owner occupancy requirement. However, the junior ADUs are subject to owner occupancy requirements. And also impact fees will not be imposed if an ADU is less than 750 square feet. Now, the second part is related more to the development standards. And so what we outlined is there would be a ministerial review and approval of these fairly prescriptive standards, and I'll summarize some of those in the ordinance. So there's for setbacks, no ADU may be located within 20 feet of the front and corner lot lines, and no ADU may be located within 4 feet of a side yard or rear yard. Related to FAR, which also means floor area ratio, attached and detached ADUs have a maximum size of 850 square feet for studios and 1 bedrooms, and up to 1,000 square feet for 2 bedrooms. The city may not adopt certain requirements or minimum maximums for FAR, minimum lot size, etc. for either attached or detached dwellings if the effect of that would be to not permit at least an 800 square foot ADU is at least 16 feet in height with 4-foot side and rear setbacks. Regarding height, this new standard is a maximum of 16 feet. Staff would like to suggest the City Council may want to discuss whether to allow attached ADUs to have a height not to exceed the primary residence. And then related to parking standards, those have been relaxed. When an applicant is converting a garage or carport covered parking for use as an ADU, the off-street parking spaces are no longer needed to be replaced. I will also highlight that staff is in receipt of public comment letters from, I don't know if I can say his name correctly, Citizen George Kaloyanidis and Renee Champ from Napa Sonoma ADU Center. At the end of my presentation, our city attorney can further respond to these comments. And then lastly, the CEQA clearance for this action is the ordinance is statutorily exempt from CEQA. The proposed ordinance implements the state's ADU law. So there's 3 recommended actions for the council to consider tonight. The first would be to review the draft ordinance and determine it's exempt from the requirements of CEQA. The second is to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 17116, Section 17116.030 of the St. Helena Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. And 3, introduce and conduct for first reading of the ordinance by title only and waive the further reading. That concludes my presentation. I also have Senior Planner Heacock and, as I mentioned, the City Attorney's Office who worked together to draft the ordinance to help respond to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any initial comments or questions from our council? I'm seeing Mr. Knudson's hand.
Yeah, it's George Kaloyanidis, a great guy. I put a comment back to staff regarding his letter, but I think I'll wait for the discussion to talk about that. But he knows real estate, he knows architecture, he knows our town extremely well.
Thank you. Additional council comment at this point? Ms. Koberstein?
Yeah, I want to follow up on George's comments as well. He and I talked a couple times and emailed, and I have some suggestions for things we might want to consider when we get into further discussion.
Okay. Additional, Ms. Chateau?
I want to follow up too on Renee Champ's comments that she made as the director of the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. I think that being collaborative and working with them as a resource on this, it's very helpful.
Thank you. Additional comment? So I will open it for public comment in a moment here. Just sort of wanting to understand the timeline on this with the recommendations. I'll ask Ms. DeRosa, the comments put in by Mr. Kaloyanidis and by Renee Champ, are these timing-wise, is there a way to sort of incorporate what is felt that we come to consensus on or from these suggestions? Where are we in terms of the timeline of perhaps folding some of these things in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Depending on how the discussion goes, if there's consensus, for example, if we want to, clarify height on attached ADUs and we want to clarify, just do some call outs. And I think especially as we get into the discussion from the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, we are in agreement with some of those changes. And so if as long as those changes were very clearly made as part of the motion for the record, that we and staff could go back and draft those changes and incorporate them into the second reading. I'll also defer to our city attorney to see if she has any further follow-up. But it just, if there's clear consensus, I think we can do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ms. Ueda?
I was just going to say that's correct. If the council has agreement on language tonight as to how it wants to see the ordinance possibly edited, it can introduce the ordinance and have first reading tonight, and then we would bring it back to council for second reading and adoption at your next regular meeting. If, however, you direct staff to go back and make some additional changes that will require either more research or significant drafting, and you want to take a look at it again, we would likely then bring it back to you for first reading again at your next meeting.
Okay, very good. My thought is to open it to public comment now and see if we have some comment, and then bring it back. And then Ms. DeRosa, do you think that we should walk through the suggestions sort of in an orderly manner? What's your suggestion about how to proceed after public comment?
We could do that. We could actually start with the Napa Sonoma letter, because there's some clear comments there, and then we could follow up with the second letter after that. And I'll let our city attorney actually lead that discussion. We had some earlier discussion today about those.
Okay, great. So what I'll do now is I'm going to open it to public comment. See, I'll check with Ms. Nixon if somebody is on the line.
I am looking right now to see if we have any members of the public with raised hands, and at this moment, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, very good. So then I will bring it back to our council, and the suggestion is to begin with the Napa Sonoma ADU Center letter. And if that sounds good to you, Ms. DeRosa, I'll just hand it to you to sort of lead us through.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to defer to our city attorney.
Very good.
Okay, sure. Does the council just want to go in order for the comments that are listed, or do you have a particular? Okay. So
can I ask a process question, Ms. Ueda? Is that possible?
Sure.
Was this approved by the Planning Commission?
The ordinance was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Okay.
I believe they considered it at their May 19th meeting.
Okay.
And so these comments came in after that, is what it appears. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just wonder if to me, the comments sort of get to the heart of the matter, and sort of given our zoning update that's ongoing, and sort of they raise a number of questions to me. I just wonder if perhaps the Napa Sonoma and Mr. Kalianidis's comments could go back to planning because to me, I think our ordinance needs to be rethought. But I don't want to get in front of the discussion.
Ms. Koberstein?
I would only add, I spoke with George as late as this afternoon, and his original letter that's in there, I think, is from 4 or 5 days ago. And we've been going back and forth over a number of issues, and I don't think that all of the concerns that are in the letter are still concerns of his. I can just talk about a couple of the issues. That would be my suggestion.
Is there, and I'm hearing what Mr. Knudsen is saying in terms of Planning Commission, who tends to be a little more focused on these items. Is there a value to having them look first at how these might fold in? I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Ms. Koberstein.
Well, I think we should have a little discussion here first and see what we think about some of these things that are being brought to us now. And then we could certainly, one of our options would be to send it back to them or, move forward on our own. But I think we should discuss what's in front of us first.
Okay, very good. So with that, Ms. Ueda, we'll pass it back to you.
Okay, sure. So I'll start then with the comments that were submitted by the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. They had 8 in total. some of them I think are easier to understand than others. And I mean that not in the sense of I mean it primarily in the sense that this ordinance is highly technical, and it's technical in large part because the statute that governs this area is highly technical and complicated. And so some of these issues are fairly detail oriented and specific. So the first issue that they have concerns the definition of a junior accessory dwelling unit. The comment is that it would be helpful to include in the ordinance the requirement that there be an exterior entrance. And we can go ahead and include the requirement to have an exterior entrance in the ordinance, and the language would be added to the definition of a junior accessory dwelling unit to say something similar to a junior accessory dwelling unit includes a separate entrance from the main entrance to the structure with an interior entry to the main living area. So it would basically provide that the junior accessory dwelling unit does have a separate entrance that's separate from the main structure, but then there is an interior entry into the main living area. So the idea of the junior accessory dwelling unit is that it is a part, and it is included as a part of the primary dwelling unit with an exterior door or exit out to the front. So that's the first comment. The second comment is that they don't believe that it's clear from the language in the ordinance that both an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit can be built on a single family lot. The comment is that since homeowners can build both, they wonder if it will be possible to revise the language to make it clear to homeowners. We've reviewed both the statute and the proposed ordinance, and we don't actually necessarily agree with this statement because the ordinance does address situations where property owners are permitted to build both a detached accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit. And that is found in section capital D, number 2, and then lowercase b. So that's capital D, number 2, lowercase b, talks about the detached ADUs on single family lots where there can be an additional junior ADU built on that same lot. So we think that's already taken care of in the ordinance. The third comment has to do with accessory dwelling units that are built on multifamily lots. The comment there is that they believe it would be made clear that at least 2 accessory dwelling units could be built on a multifamily or mixed-use lot, including 2 detached ADUs, plus non-living space can be converted into the ADUs up to a quarter of the existing apartment count. We did review the ordinance to make sure that that language is actually in there, and it is. So under capital D, capital D 2C speaks to conversion on multifamily lots, and then capital D 2D speaks to the no more than 2 detached ADUs on a lot that has an existing multifamily dwelling. So I think perhaps part of the issue is that the ordinance is long and complicated, but we do believe that the language that they're looking for is in the ordinance, both for the up to 2 units for multifamily lots as well as for the conversion of non-living space. The fourth comment has to do with placing a deed restriction on the property that would not permit the selling of the ADU from the rest of the parcel. And the comment there is that perhaps placing a deed restriction on the property is an onerous requirement, and they're wondering if there might be a less burdensome requirement that the city could consider. However, there's an acknowledgement that state law seems to require that an owner obtain a deed restriction for a junior ADU. State law does require that an owner put a deed restriction on any junior accessory dwelling unit. This ordinance also provides for the another accessory dwelling unit that isn't a junior one to also have a deed restriction on it. The ordinance provides that the city would basically provide that form of the deed restriction, and we could certainly we have forms. We could just, the idea is to provide that form of the deed restriction to the property owner. They complete it, they acknowledge what the restrictions are in the ordinance, and then that gets recorded. The purpose of that recording is really to let to let subsequent purchasers of that property know that this restriction is on the property and that they aren't allowed to purchase the property in a manner, if they wanted to buy the ADU separately. So it does serve a purpose of, putting the future buyers on notice and protecting the property. And so we think it's the most effective way to put people on notice that the property is restricted. The fifth comment is a concern about bedrooms, and the ordinance does put a limit of 2 bedrooms on these accessory dwelling units. The concern is that having a bedroom limitation could be deemed to be discriminatory based on familial status or some type of protected class under fair housing laws. And while we do understand and believe that having restrictions on housing based on familial status isn't something the city can do, this ordinance doesn't do that. It does provide a maximum number of bedrooms of 2. The law does not prohibit this number of bedrooms, and the law does allow the city to place objective standards on accessory dwelling units. And so we believe that the city is permitted to do that, and that nothing in the law prevents that. The sixth comment is that the language for specific ADU requirements should be revised to clarify that no size restriction can limit an ADU to less than 800 square feet. They read the law to say that it can't limit an ADU to less than 800 square feet, even if an ADU of 800 square feet is greater than 50% of the size of their primary residence. So this comment is a little bit difficult to understand, but just because it is pretty technical. But in the ordinance in F1C, let me get there. In F1C, what it provides is that application of certain development standards, such as floor area ratio or lot coverage, et cetera, if those things would limit the size of the ADU, they can't limit the size to be less than 800 square feet. So it's only certain standards. If the application of those standards would get the ADU down to below 800 square feet, we can't follow those standards. We have to allow at least 800 square feet. And we believe that is already taken care of in the ordinance. And again, it's capital F1C. Number 7, they believe there's a typo under fees for impact fees, and that concerns with charging a proportionate share of impact fees on the ADU as they are for the primary dwelling. That is actually an error. We apologize for that. That has, for some reason, been drafted that way in our ordinance for quite some time, and nobody seems to have caught that particular error. So we do think the language should be flipped. So it's the floor area of the accessory dwelling unit divided by the floor area of the primary dwelling. And then finally, the last comment is that they asked for confirmation as to whether clause 2A under the section on utility fees is accurate. We have gone back and checked both the statute and the language of the ordinance, and that language is in F4 and is consistent with the statutory language. So that's it for those 8 comments. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Any initial questions, comments here from the council? Ms. Chateau?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard it right. So it sounds like staff we're recommending number 1 is the one that could be changed out of that list.
Number 1 and number 7.
Number 1 and number 7, right. 7 was thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Any other council comment here at this point? Ms. Koberstein?
I'm going to try to summarize the discussions I've had with George. And if this goes back to the Planning Commission, I'm sure he would have another opportunity to elaborate a little further. But it basically comes down to sort of one concept that This state statute, which is very tricky to find and map your way through it and figure out what it really allows you to do, it does have a section that says that it doesn't limit the ability of the city to adopt less restrictive requirements than what are found here. And that was primarily the gist of the communications that I had with Mr. Kalianides. He was interested in looking at perhaps more floor area or greater height in certain circumstances. And one of them would be, the way the ordinance is written. I think that one of the obvious outcomes might be an ADU that's back in the corner of the lot, and it maintains these 4-foot minimum setbacks that the statute allows, and it's got a certain size and height that goes along with that particular way of putting in an ADU. Now, imagine, if you will, somebody who has a fairly large lot, and they have a lot of buildable area left on their lot, a lot of yard where they could put an addition on their house that could be taller. They could add more floor area to their house. And so the issue there was, should we be giving some thought to people who might actually choose to put an attached ADU in that kind of location on their property? And should we allow them to go to a greater height limit and perhaps more floor area? And that sort of leads to another issue of, is that still going to be purely ministerial review, meaning no design review? Somebody might come and propose one of these when they're building a brand new house, and it's part of the whole package, but the ADU is supposed to be treated kind of separately. And I think it's something we should think about. We did change our design review rather radically about a year ago, and for single family homes, we pretty much limited it to brand new construction or design review where somebody, I believe, was putting a second or third story on an area where they didn't previously have that. And it seems to me it's worth considering, particularly for a detached ADU, whether we should also exempt that from design review if it's built in the buildable area of the lot. It would be consistent with the idea that we're promoting that kind of development, and it wouldn't necessarily require design review, just like it doesn't require it if it's sitting way over in the corner. So that's pretty much the substance. He was interested in the possibility of more height and perhaps greater floor area in certain circumstances. So I support his comments, and don't believe it's something we can probably hash out here tonight. I do support sending it back to the Planning Commission, and he may comment further. Then I think he raised some good points.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Knudsen?
In general, I'm just a fan of design review. I think I know it's slower, but we have a special town, and there's no reason why we can't, to everything we're allowed to give comment. I think it's really great. It's neighborly, actually, to allow neighbors to make comments, but I'd be very interested in the way the Planning Commission would approach this, particularly because I think these changes are actually significant, and I hate to do sort of ad hoc. I know it's not ad hoc, but on the fly, the work that the Planning Commission might be able to put more thought into.
They can't really, there's no design review of these ADUs under this current regulation. They don't have the authority to do that at all. So the question is, if we were to change things a little bit and look at an ADU that's sitting in the buildable part of the lot as opposed to in the setbacks, are we going to allow design review in that case?
I would. I mean, I guess that's my comment, is where we're able to provide design review. I'd like to allow our residents to participate in design review, so.
I'll just add the final sort of comeback on that theory is, and this isn't meant to sound unneighborly, but I could build it 4 feet off the property line and it could be 16 feet tall and there's no design review allowed. And so does it make sense? Does it follow that if I move it a little further from the property line, that we should decide design review is required? And it's really all part of how much support do we want to give to the ministerial aspect of ADUs. It would certainly be required if it was attached to the house. It would be a new construction. It would probably be impossible to avoid looking at it in that context.
You're exactly right, and I guess that's why these are sort of complicated issues. And I would hate to further exempt design review just because of the exemptions that were mandated by the state. But I would love to have a full discussion of planning that we could watch. And see if there's, now that we've sort of surfaced some of the more major issues, it'd be lovely to see if there's further public comment as well. I'm looking at who our attendees are. Maybe some of those folks would like to speak.
I'm going to open that up. Yes. Is there any other comment, council comment, before I go back to the public comment to see if there's any thoughts at this point? Okay, so after the discussion, I feel appropriate just to open it up. Ms. Nixon, are we seeing any public comment?
I am looking right now, and I am not seeing anyone with a raised hand for public comment.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I concur that this going back to planning is an excellent idea. I just have a question on are we comfortable on our time frames moving forward? If this takes another loop back through planning, are we still where we need to be?
So I just have a comment about that. The ordinance not the ordinance. The state law went into effect at the beginning of the year, and many other jurisdictions have already adopted accessory dwelling unit ordinances in compliance with the state law, because if the city has an existing ordinance that doesn't comply with the state law, the city's existing ADU ordinance isn't valid. You can't actually enforce it within the city. And the city has to rely on the provisions that are in state law, which does require basically building permit only approval for these certain circumstances. And so one option that is possible, if the city is concerned about, the additional time that it might take to take this to Planning Commission, would be to adopt the ordinance as is with the couple of amendments mentioned earlier, and then really spend some additional time thinking through and giving direction to the Planning Commission about some of these additional changes that might be thought about that the city is permitted to do. So that's an option. I don't know how much longer it would take to take the ordinance back through the Planning Commission with some additional information and then have it come back to the council for first and second reading.
Ms. DeRosa, do you see a time frame for what that might look like?
Honestly, it probably wouldn't be until August, and then we would, depending on council agendas, if everything gets worked out, then it could go back to the council in September. But one thing, I would like to also add is that, everything that I'm hearing about what HCD likes to see with these amended ordinances is that they want streamlined, ministerial. And while they understand like historic properties are a reason why you can pull back and make someone go through, for example, a design review process, my concern is that we just don't want to make the process too cumbersome. I know that design review definitely serves a purpose in all jurisdictions, but there's the whole reason why so much of the ADU ordinance has been such a big area of focus by the state of California is that so many applicants were getting hamstrung by the discretionary process it involved. And so they wanted just to have a very clear green path forward for people to do boom, 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 and off they go with a building permit. So it is a policy decision. I feel that the Planning Commission was comfortable with the direction we were going. We still do a lot of ministerial permit reviews, this would help further clarify how people can, actually this ordinance is very helpful for people that want to convert their garages because they don't have to replace the parking. I think there's a lot of good clarifications it does provide.
So, Ms. Chateau.
I was going to agree with that and what our city attorney had recommended with moving forward what we can tonight, making the small recommendations that we can. I think it's important to have something for people that's better and following what the state has intended for us to do.
Thank you. Mr. Doring, do you have any thoughts on where we are?
I'm inclined to accept the wise advice of our city attorney that we can adopt this ordinance now with the changes, the additions number 1 and number 7 from the correspondence, and also send it back at our planning commission's convenience to allow Mr. Kalianitis to present his case, and then the others who think that 800 square feet and 16 feet in height is insufficient in some cases. I don't personally believe that, but I think he should be able to make that case at the planning commission. But I think it's imperative for the reasons stated by our city council that we should adopt this ordinance tonight with the slight changes that have been outlined.
Very good. Ms. Koberstein or Mr. Knudsen? Ms. Koberstein?
I agree. I think this is just first reading, correct? And then it'll come back to us one more time. Right.
Okay. Mr. Knudsen?
Correct.
Okay. Very good. And so with that, I think we're at a place we can move forward. And so we have the recommendation in terms of what's recommended here. What needs to be amended to fit the conversation for tonight?
I think it's 1 and 7 on the memo from Napa Sonoma.
Okay.
That's right. It's oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I was just going to say it's the changes that I mentioned to both number 1 and number 7 from the comments from Napa Sonoma ADU Center. And then we also caught one minor clerical error in the process of doing the redlining for the Planning Commission. There's a reference that needs to be changed, a reference to section C4 just needs to be changed to C5 that we would make between now and second reading. So there are three changes.
Okay, and those would, just in looking at sections 1, 2, and 3 here, that would come in the second section? Am I reading that correctly? If somebody were to make the motion, just wanting to see where that would fall, the changes.
Right, it would be basically to introduce and conduct first reading of the ordinance as amended.
As amended, okay.
I move that.
And is there a second?
Second.
And roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the focus on this. And now we'll move to item 10.2. This is project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement. Am I required to read this entire piece here?
One of us needs to.
Pardon? Ms. Uedo, am I required to read this entire piece?
I mean, all of the separate actions?
Yes.
Yeah, I would read each of them.
Okay, so this will take a little patience from you folks, so I'm going to begin here. This is number 1, consideration of a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Helena determining that no substantial changes requiring preparation of a subsequent EIR have been made to project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement, as a result of proposed modification to Transportation and Traffic Mitigation Measure TRA-PA2 and approving an addendum to the previously certified final EIR as the appropriate environmental document for project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement as modified. 2, consideration of a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Helena. 1, approving McCullough Construction Incorporated of Arcata, California as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. 2, authorizing the city manager to execute, enter into, and implement the contract by and between the city and McCullough Construction Incorporated for project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement in the amount of $3,297,749.41. And 3, authorizing the Director of Public Works to approve change orders not to exceed 20% of the contract amount. 4, and authorizing the city manager and or the Public Works Director to negotiate, execute, enter into, and implement any regulatory permit-related agreements pertaining to project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement. 3, consideration of a resolution of the City of Council of the City of St. Helena approving and authorizing the city manager to execute, enter into, and implement the Cultural Resources Monitoring and Treatment Agreement by and between the city and the Middletown Rancheria of Pomo Indians of California for project number W-26, Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement. And this is Ms. Smithies.
Yes, thank you. It's a long report, and I wanted to take you through the reason for to summarize the addendum for this. The EIR is that we had limitations on our trucking traffic on Highway 29 outside the working hours of 9 to 3, and we did an updated traffic study in the last 2 weeks. Our level of service in 2006 was at E, which is why we prevented truck traffic on 29 during peak traffic hours. Right now with COVID, the traffic has gone down to a level of service of an A, which is the best level of service you can have. And so that's why we amended this, so we can try to haul as much sediment as possible during the earlier and later hours, and continue to monitor Highway 29 throughout the project for the next 4 months. And if it gets anywhere near or to the level of service of E, to put those restrictions, stop those truck traffic outside the hours of 9 to 3. The good news is we have radar traffic sign data in the southbound direction now that's been collecting this data. And then we have our message board that we have implemented in the northbound direction. So in addition, we have the award of contract. We had 6 bids out of the 9 pre-qualified bidders. We had 6 actually bid on the project. And McCullough Construction Incorporated was the low bidder. We did receive a bid protest letter on the 19th from the second low bidder, contending that they did not meet their good faith effort. So we wanted to add specific language to the awarded contract today that the City Council hereby finds that McCullough Construction Incorporated has made good faith efforts to solicit bids from DBEs, that the Public Works Director appropriately rejected the bid protest of Sierra Mountain Construction Incorporated, and that McCullough Construction is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. And the final part of this project resolution is the monitoring, the Native Americans monitoring during construction to make sure there's no findings during the excavation of the sediment material and the dam material on the project and throughout the project. It's in draft form right now. We have not finalized the agreement. We're very close. I received response back from Rancheria today, and they're going to provide a written response that we can share with our city attorney. But to expedite this project, we wanted to make sure that we include everything now. As I said earlier, we have one, the cultural section 106 of the Army Corps is the final step in getting our Army Corps permit and having all permits in hand. We received feedback. There's a memorandum of understanding or agreement between the Army Corps and SHPO, that we also have a draft. That's why we add the language for being able to have Mark Prestwich, city manager, and or myself sign, just so we can expedite these permit agreements. And I believe that's all I have. Jen Hyman with EKI, she's a project manager. She's led the design team and will be leading the construction management. And I have Mike Biddle, who's been our special counsel on this project the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And to answer any questions you have or concerns you have with the EIR addendum and or the other project, the bid protest. In addition, I have a schedule, the construction schedule we have from the contractor. We got it this afternoon. I was hoping Priya would show that. She was going to share the screen here. So
yes, just give me 1 second.
It's a little small, but you can see it's a very jam-packed schedule in the early months of July, and then they start getting moving on the project down the installation of the bike. There's a lot of work to go on to preliminary get started and safe the creek. And if there's specific questions on the construction schedule, we literally got this revised schedule at 5:30 this evening, and I wanted to share with you that there's a lot. It's a complicated project, but we believe we'll be able to get through and complete the project by the end of October. I also have there's also a fact sheet that we'll be posting on the city website and sharing to the community of why this project is needed and necessary. And it's a nice summary. EKI and WRA put this fact sheet together to help the community understand why it's so important to the restoration of York Creek and bringing back steelhead to this area of the county and the whole watershed. We also have California water audits on the phone call to discuss a later item, but and they may want to speak during public comment on this item as well. So with that, I'd recommend that City Council approve these resolutions. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and or the respective people. This project's been, as you know, a long haul, and the team that we brought on here is really made it happen. And I have to thank them, as well as our elected officials, for helping to get our permits expedited in the last 6 months. It's been a foot race.
Well, I want to say thank you to staff and Ms. Smithies and for all the work. This is a legacy, long-time project, and to have it at this point is really wonderful and remarkable. And I want to give a special thanks to Mr. Biddle for his sticking with this and the work he's done. It's really been tremendous, and we owe you a great deal of gratitude. So thank you. I want to open it up to any initial council comments or questions at this point, and then I'll go out to the public. Any thoughts at this moment? Okay, seeing none, I will open it up. One thing I do want to ask is in terms of the communication with the POMO who are working with us on this, the indigenous people and the cultural aspects, is there a way that we can consider, and it may be in the further item on this, sort of celebrating this with them? So this is a project that I think means a lot to a lot of folks, and I think it's an honor that we have them here participating. And I'd just like to put it out there that we consider some way of celebrating this with the POMO, who are, the indigenous folks of this area. I want to put it out there for consideration on that issue. So with that, I will open it, unless I see a question or comment, I'll open it to public comment and see with Ms. Nixon if somebody's on the line.
Yes, we do have someone who would like to speak for public comment, so let me allow this person to talk. All right, you should be able to
Good evening. I'm William McKinnon, General Counsel for WaterIT California. And I was listening earlier this evening to your opening public comments about climate change. And I was thinking how long and dreary the list was and how overwhelming the problem is. And what a terrible black industry I work in, where quite honestly, every problem seems just almost incapable of being resolved. But what I was preferring for speaking to you this evening, and I very much appreciate this opportunity, I came across something that was written about York Creek in 1881. It says, Napa County is noted far and wide for the abundance and varieties of springs within its limits, they being both mineral and pure, cold and thermal. From every mountainside, beautiful streams of water gush forth and find their way to the nearest brooklet, where their united rivulets form into a beautiful babbling stream that sings a merry song as it dances across the pebble bed. This is in the same article that writes about 5 gentlemen getting together in 1870 and forming a water company. Mr. Krug, Mr. Behringer, Mr. Fulton, Mr. York, and they put in $44 each. And for that $44, they dug a reservoir. And in 1878, the Star, which has been in business, by the way, since 1871, wrote about how they had managed to construct a 24-foot high dam, 225 feet long, across York Canyon. Mr. York, who lived with 2 or 3 sons, the record is unclear, received $300 for his water rights. And ever since then, there's been no access to the waters up above the York Dam, which are prime spawning grounds for salmonids. And the reason I say all of this is because the solution to the big problem starts with each person. And what you folks are doing here is a very small dam removal on a very small creek, but it is going to change the fish population in the Napa River dramatically. It may take a few years. We have to be patient, but Mother Earth is just absolutely breathtaking. If you give her a place to live, she will create life. And I think you really all have to be congratulated. It didn't make it 150 years. And it's going to get better. And the project that you've developed, the project that you're going to implement with local materials is beautiful. It is truly something to be proud of. And I think that it's something that St. Helena has the potential of showing other members of the Napa community how to do it right. You are showing them how to do it right. And we are so grateful for it. And I can tell you that there are other parts that are going to come together with you to make the Napa Valley something special.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Our 4
Yes,
minutes,
sir.
but we very much appreciate the input. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. And something we are very proud of. So we want to compliment our council and our staff and the community. This is a big step, and we're really pleased. Is there any additional public comment, Ms. Nixon?
At this time, I am not seeing any more additional public comments.
Okay, so I will bring it back now to the council. Is there any additional public comment? I mean, any additional council comment or question on the item? So I'm seeing none. And so I'm going to ask for a motion. I'm sorry, my iPad just, here we go. A motion on the recommendation.
All right, I move that we consider approval, that we approve and adopt the 3 resolutions enclosed as attachment 1, attachment 2, and attachment 3. Yes.
And Mr. Biddle? Mr. Biddle?
Yeah, I would just ask to clarify for the record that the motion include the language that Erica Smithies read that would go in as an additional finding in resolution number 2 that approves the contract to MCI.
Yes, my motion includes that additional language that Public Works Director Smithies spoke about.
Very good. So if we have that with the motion, then do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
And roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for all this good work. Thank you. Okay, very good. So we will now move to item 10.3. This is discussion and consideration of the City of St. Helena water supply and possible direction of establishing a water shortage emergency condition requiring the implementation of Phase 1 water regulations. And this is, again, Ms. Smithies.
Thank you. As we discussed, this item is being brought back from the May 12th meeting. Council directed they wanted, well, I have to give a monthly update as well, but requested some drafts, graphs of city water use and, what's our production or supply today. And I just wanted to provide that information to you tonight. My recommendation is that we're still not quite to a water shortage for Phase 1. Now, I know we have a very good public comment from our former Safe Yield Committee Chair, Alan Galbraith, as well as getting on the shared screen here. Thank you, Bria. You can go to the next slide, or is that me that does that? Our annual water demand has gone down. This is actually billing summaries on an annual basis. And then as I was corrected by Mr. Alan Galbraith, I did not factor in the 15% water loss for the net safe yield. So if you take the billing meter summaries and during their findings of their safe yield committee meetings, they found the 15% water loss was about a good average for unavailable water in our city system that doesn't get to the residents once produced. The graph I originally provided with the publishing was a graph of our actual water production, which was also a similar trend. It's been going down since the early years, which is a good thing. That means our water conservation efforts are working. As you can see, from 11-12 down, we were during a statewide drought. But numbers have continued to go down and stay below that safe yield of 1950 acre feet per year. And though they've trended up this year, I approximated a forecast through the end of this month. It's going back up, but we also have had the COVID and numbers have been going up since about March. We're also in a drought year, critically dry year of less than 22 inches a year, 22 inches of rainfall a year. The difference between now and what happened in the early years is that we didn't have 600 acre feet of water from the city of Napa. We also had higher user amount numbers. Our numbers have gone down and over time. And you can speculate if that's second party homes or if in general water neutrality is working, water conservation measures are working. But right now we're trending below the first criteria, which is this year in the fiscal year of 18-19, we were in a surplus. And I believe at the end of this year, the 5-year rolling average will still show us in a surplus for July 1. But we won't know that until our next meter reads come in early July. If you go to the next slide. This is a combined water source usage. The findings in the Safe Yield report showed that our average water use, we needed to keep below a 450 acre feet per year drawing from our wells. We are the only municipality in the county of Napa that has municipal wells. And so you can see the trend line there is that our wells have been staying well below 450 for the last 9 years. And they're averaging about 300 acre feet per year, which is good. Our draws are down. That helps us use more Stonebridge, our wells when we need to, our groundwater resources when we need to in years like the now. And you can see our use of our production of our Bell Canyon water supply as well as our Napa water. Napa water has fluctuated in some years, but it stayed pretty consistent in the last 4 years because that is our most expensive water. We have to use our 600 acre foot allocation per year, or we have to pay for it regardless. So we try to want to use that 600 acre feet of water every year. Next slide. Here's the Bell Canyon capacity. I was asked to show over time our Bell Canyon capacities. In the early 2000s, we heavily used Bell Canyon, but we always looked like we filled up. We typically came over 80%. The year that looks very similar to this year was 2007. But again, our numbers for usage are going down as well. So they might look they're on par 2007 and 2020, but also our usage is lower. So, I mean, will we get down to 30%? It's looking like that this year, but we've been there before. And that's why my recommendations are, go to the next slide, please. Well, here's another different kind of viewpoint of where we've been in the past and where we are today. We're close to the bottom of where we've been in the past. Next page. With just Bell Canyon. Prior to 2007, no city of Napa water was available. Post 2011, the city has an annual allocation of 600 acre feet a year with the potential to purchase an additional 200 acre feet for a total of 800, but it's not a guarantee. The 2011 Safe Yield report recommended limiting the Stonebridge wells to 450 acre feet per year. We've been doing well with that in the past 8 years. In the past 8 weeks, we've been optimizing our use at both Napa water and Stonebridge well. But we still show our projections of Bell Canyon may fall between 33 to 40% by November, but it'll still get us through November. We can start collecting water on November 15th, but there's no guarantee we'll have rain. Bell Canyon has been below 30% in the past, and it's gotten down as low as in the 20s in December of 2007, which triggered phase 1 back then. And it's important to note that the city relies on a total water volume availability now from all water sources and not just Bell Canyon levels to meet system demand. Next slide. Next slide, or am I frozen? Should be. So my recommendations are to as soon as July 1, we have the meter reads through June 30th, calculate the fiscal year audit. I believe we'll still be showing within a surplus for moving to 1920, continue to conserve Bell Canyon Reservoir and optimize our other 2 water sources, but adhere to the Safe Yield Committee and update City Council on a month-to-month basis. Send out updated water conservation materials to the community via Shine, which is being produced, or deadlines next week. Send them in our utility billings and other allowable outreach efforts during COVID-19. And alert city councils of any changes to the city's water supply or any state mandates for restrictions. Right now, the U.S. Drought Monitor shows us in a severe drought for our region of California. That could change. But that's the conclusion of my report, and I welcome any questions or comments from council and or public.
Thank you very much. Certainly, we're heading into, we're in a dry year and at a place where we need to make decisions based on what is safe and best for the community. Moving towards these restrictions, it's a difficult decision, but it becomes clearer as we get into the drier season. I'm certainly in favor of moving something forward. I want to hear everybody's comments on this, and then we'll open for public comment as well. Thoughts from the council? Initial thoughts? Okay. Oh, Mr. Knudsen?
Mr. Smithies, that was a great presentation. Thank you. It was clear, very clear.
Other council comments, questions? Okay, so with that, I will open it up to public comment. And Ms. Nixon, are we seeing any public comment?
Yes, we do have public comment for this. Let me unmute this person. And okay, you should be unmuted.
Oops. I'm seeing Mr. Galbraith.
Yes, I just unmuted him, so he should be able to speak.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Alan Galbraith, City of St. Helena. As you know, I submitted a written comment that was joined in by Tim Neiman and John Sales. They served with me on the Safe Yield Committee back in 2011. Let me go through just a few points. I don't intend to reiterate everything that's in the written comment at all. But in the Safe Yield work in 2011, we were addressing what the potable water system could reliably supply in most rainfall years, that is, with rainfall of 26 inches or above, including an occasional dry year, 22 inches to 26 inches. We had a slide, a very specific slide on this in our presentation back then that showed that we were looking at a 10-year time frame, and we were assuming 8 normal years, followed by 1 dry year, and then 1 normal year. And as long as the usage was at or below the net safe yield, which is in the report of 1658 acre feet, there would be no need for water restrictions. I don't think any of us thought that the city could get through a critically dry year, rainfall under 22 inches, it was 20 inches this last year, without water restrictions. We were well aware of 2007. And let me just segue to 2007 for just a moment. Context, June 1st, 2020, Bell Canyon was at 62.9%. Back in 2007, on June 1, it was at 63.59%. Now, when you looked at the data historically, as we did, the next lowest number for Bell Canyon on June 1st was in 2008, and that was at 82.3%. And that's a difference of about 500 acre feet. And so when you're getting down to this level, you know that you're headed into a very, potentially very serious water shortage issue. And you have to keep in mind also that you don't want Bell Canyon to get too far down, because there are other uses for Bell Canyon, particularly in the case of a fire emergency. There also may be some dead pool water under the lowest of the valves, but that's really the concern. Now, just a quick couple of technical points. At the time we did our work in early 2011, we in fact assumed that the city on average would purchase more than 600 acre feet per year from Napa. Now, to my knowledge, the city has not sought at any time to purchase optional water from Napa, that being the 200 acre feet over the 600 acre feet. The expense is very high. As a result, you should, in my opinion, take all necessary steps to minimize the risk of needing to request and purchase this optional water. But there's another side to this. If the optional water is removed from the potential supply, it seems logical that the net safe yield would logically go down. Stated another way, there is less water security risk if the city is willing, if needed, to purchase the additional water from Napa over the 600 acre feet. But again, I think this is problematic both financially, and I can't really speak to this beyond conjecture, but I also believe, based upon experience, that there are operational issues as well in trying to get more than 600 acre feet up here from Napa. Now, as I reconstruct what happened nearly a decade ago, and knew so well then, the late 2011 Napa contract amendment, which the city sought on the recommendation of City Safe Yield Committee, was a tweak, though an important one. Napa now agreed to supply 600 acre feet on a take-or-pay basis in all years. Instead, under the pre-amendment, it would supply 600 acre feet in most years, but that depended upon allocations to Napa from the state, and there were trigger points in our contract where we would get the 200 feet over the 400 acre feet. But if
Mr. Galbraith, I apologize for interrupting, but if we need to wrap up after the 4 minutes, if you could just summarize here very quickly.
Well, all right. I guess my final point is simply that we are very close at this point to the net safe yield number. But again, that was not developed in the context of a critically dry year. And that makes a big difference. And so I certainly stick with the recommendation made by me and joined by Mr. Sales, Mr. Neiman, that the city should now go into a phase one water emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Ms. Smithies has a comment, I believe. Did I see?
I didn't know if I should correct it now. I wanted to thank Alan Galbraith, Tim Neiman, and then John Sells for providing comment. I reached out to both Tim and Mr. Galbraith, even as far as today, just to make sure that we had, the information, the local information. We're lucky to have the local information still today from the Safe Yield Committee, because there has been turnover, to make sure that we're following the guidelines that they presented back then. And I was also pointed out that our code should say 600 acre feet and not 400 acre feet as the trigger point. And right now it says 400. So thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that and say thanks.
Thank you. And I believe we might have, do we have another public comment?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike Hackett, once again. Wasn't planning on talking on this, but I just want to say, from my common sense perspective, that many people confuse climate with weather. I think confusing a yearly report in water availability is just about as nonsense, because you really have to look at this in at least a decade-long outlook. There's no, I'm sure, not 100% sure, but I bet however many there are in the screen that I'm looking at, if I were to ask you, do you think we're going to get more rain in future years? I don't think I'd see anybody say yes. Therefore, the city of St. Helena, needs to realize that you call it Napa water, but it's really the state water supply. You are on a precarious position, really precarious. And so I don't see how you can do it without the Napa City water supply. But it sure speaks to the idea that you cannot sustain any large-scale development in St. Helena. That's going the wrong direction. Several people spoke of climate change. A big part of that is going to be future drier weather in Northern California. There's no doubt. We got 9 years, folks. Let's not go the wrong direction. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak again.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Nixon, any further public comment?
No.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Is there a council comment or question? Where are we with the council? Am I seeing any comment, any thought on this from the council? Vice Mayor Doring.
Compared to how the staff report was originally sent out and the comments made by Mr. Galbraith and concurred to by the other gentlemen, Mr. Sales, Mr. Neiman, I'm concerned that we're very close to the safe field, and maybe there's a difference of opinion about what the
net safe yield is. I've always understood it to be 1,950 acre feet. And I think we're there, and I'm trying to get a clarification. I think you have 3 individuals who have studied this for many, many years, and I trust their instincts. I basically trust my own instincts, thinking, I don't know if we can even wait any further. And I just would like to hear a little bit more from our public works director. I guess from a public policy point of view, I think we're going to have to start educating our community on what's coming. And I'd rather start that education process now through a phase 1 and maybe have a little bit more conversation about what the downside of that is. I recognize the surcharge issue, but aren't we there yet? And why would we wait?
Ms. Smithies?
Yes, thank you. Per the code, the first criteria is the supply balance. And so I did that fiscal balance last year, the 5-year rolling average, and we're below the safe yield. We're close, but we're below. And this year our trends are still, they may be higher than a prior last 4 years, but we're still below that safe yield. I'm concerned. I get conservative about rain. You don't know, as a farmer, you know that I'm farming background. You depend on your water supply, and you can't grow crops. You can't, water your cattle, and so you can't gamble that water risk. But the code presented, it says that I need to do that audit every year. I've done it. It's below. But we're so close. It's that judgment call on do we move forward now or do we wait? And we won't know until November 15th or even October if we're going to start getting rain. We haven't seen the forecast yet on we start getting those forecasts in the summer about early rains or late rains, or are we going another drought? We haven't gotten that information yet, or I haven't. Just the drought monitor giving us the bad news right now. So that's why I was cautious, though. And are we really there? The code says we're not, but council can overrule my decision.
Do we have additional council thought at this point? Ms. Koberstein?
I tend to agree with Paul, and I respect Erica's opinion and concern that we are very close. When you look at the restrictions that go in place with phase 1, a lot of it is really directed at landscaping. It's not hosing off your sidewalk, putting a nozzle on your hose when you wash your car. I mean, these are pretty common sense things that a lot of people are probably doing, and I think there is some merit to taking this step so that people will realize that phase 2 could be coming, if the water, if we don't get the water, and just kind of reinforce good habits.
So in terms of the surcharge, percentage-wise on a monthly water, we have bi-monthly now, but for a family, for a home, what could somebody expect in terms of an uptick in their water bill with phase 1?
It's the 6% use charge. So it's a 6% increase on what they're already using. I don't know if our finance director can provide more, what the actual, what a utility bill would look like for an average residential house. I would have to pull up the rate study to get back to you on that one.
All we do is take the median and multiply times 1.06, of course, 6% increase. It's interesting. I mean, we've received comments, or I have at least, about people's concern about our water rates, and they've been having them ever since our last rate study and before. On the other hand, I understand the requirements for a water emergency in that part of the incentive for charging slightly more, a surcharge, is, well, there's twofold. One is we want to encourage water conservation. But the second is we need to replace the revenue from the water conservation. So that's, it's a closed system. We got to have enough revenue to support the operation of our water system. That's my comment.
Ms. Chateau?
I just have one clarifying question. So I understand what you're saying about our code, and we're really close to it now. But is the assumption that we would not be in a good place if we don't get rain in October? Like, when do we need rain? When does that change?
November 15th, so we can start to carry on taking in water again in the reservoir. November 15th to May 15th.
So we'll be fine with no rain until November 15th.
12/15.
We can make it through. Projections still show we'll get through. Actually, right now the forecast would still show us getting through December, but the code says, can you get through November with your current water supply? The answer is yes. The first trigger is are we in a deficit, or our 5-year rolling average on July 1? Are we in a deficit or surplus? Next criteria, any one of the following. The next criteria step in the staff report is, will the volume delivered, the second one is the volume of water delivered to the city of Napa will not exceed 400 acre feet. City of Napa has not said we're in a deficit, that they can provide us their 600 acre feet. The volume of water anticipated to be available prior to November 1st, as determined by the Director of Public Works, is not sufficient to meet projected demand. Even in early April, we projected that we'd still be, if we got no rain in November, December, we'd still be in the 28% by January at Bell Canyon alone. And then the fourth one is conditions requiring the establishment of a phase 2 water emergency as determined by the Director of Public Works appears to be imminent. Now, as you guys, we heard from the Safe Yield Committee, they've been here a lot longer. I'm not seeing it in the code that we're there yet, but the net safe yield, we're just under it. We've been hovering under it for the last 5-6 years.
Erica,
it's also be based on the usage, the water demand by our users. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there any part of this that will change in a month, or are we waiting for a longer? I mean, are we hovering in this area that you're saying? Would something be different in July than it is now?
If users start using an exorbitant amount of water, we are in a heat wave. We're in warmer temperatures right now than we have been in the past. So, I mean, that's the concern, is we're in a drought and the temperatures are high.
Okay.
That's more evaporation at Bell Canyon, more water use in our landscape, more water use in our vineyards. Though most vineyard production is on wells in our city. That's the concern, more water use by our residents and our commercial users.
And so this, in a sense, incentivizes less. People can still not pay more if they use less. So it's
Correct.
Not necessarily costing people if they conserve. Mr. Doring, I see you had.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification, Erica, what figure are you using currently today when you describe our safe yield? What is the number that you're talking about, and how close are we? My understanding is we're above the safe yield, according to the information I've received, and you think we're just under it. What number are you using so we all can compare apples to apples? Hello?
Oh, Erica, your mute button. You're mute, Erica.
Sorry about that. I have the spreadsheet open. I don't know if I have the ability to share a screen. If Priya can let me know. I can share. So the numbers we pull is actually from the fiscal year metered number use. And I discovered today, again, that not only is our number a little slightly inflated, we were including raw water. Even the safe yield report included raw water numbers in the total potable water demand in our safe yield report. So in some years, it might be 10 acre feet pulled by our 2 raw water users, or it could be up to 46 acre feet. So those numbers were slightly inflated even in 2011. But 1950 was the whole, that number is a set aside. I just want to let you know that the numbers that you see on the graph today were pulled from our meter data. So let me see if I can share the screen here.
I just want to know if our current usage is above 1950. That's the most important determination.
No, so our production for the last, so if your total water production is below 1950, your delivery is going to be even less than 1950. So we've been since 1415, our annual water production was 1570, 1465, 1594, 1790, 1688, and this year we're probably looking in the 1700s. That's your total production of your water supply. If our safe yield is 1950 delivered water, how are we even close to 1950 if our water produced is over 200 acre feet less? That's where my the graph is like spread out, but you're averaging 200 acre feet below on your production alone. So
Ms. Smithies, that's a follow-on question to that is, we've just been through this pandemic, well, we're still in it, where even though the town was completely full, all residences were full from my unscientific survey, but the hotels were closed, many businesses were closed, most businesses were closed, and Meadowood was closed, and that's ramping up slowly. So shouldn't our water usage have been dramatically lower over the last 3 months or so? I mean, we've got less production, but we also presumably have less use because of the business and hotel hospitality closures.
We've had some conversations about that, and more people were cooking at home during that time, so perhaps washing more dishes. More people that may have a second home in an urban area may have desired to move to their more rural setting. And so there are situations like that that may be contributing to some of the higher usage.
So our usage has been higher than normal despite COVID?
Correct.
Well,
Ms. Koberstein, do you have?
No, thank you.
Ms. Koberstein, do you have any thoughts on where we are?
No, I'm listening at this point.
Okay.
Well, what chart do you want to show us? I'd like to look at the chart that you're relying on to do the comparison for this current year.
If the power, so I have a PowerPoint. I can have the production. I can show the production sheet if I don't drop the call here.
Could you show the usage as well again, please?
So this one just showed the 1950 of the safe yield, but the safe yield is dependent on actually water delivered. So if you look from, so this is pulled from our monthly water reports that are available online. They don't go back all the way to 2010, 11. They start in year 2014. But the water produced, even back at 10, 11 was at 1817. And as you can see, it trends way below during the drought years. And then it starts picking up again, once we got out of the water restrictions, 17, 18. But then it went down to 1688. And this year it's trending about a little over 17 on our water production side. That's not actual water metered. So you go to the water demand sheet. Is everyone seeing this okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
This water demand sheet, it's the actual metered water is the top water. Is the top line highlighted in yellow. And then below, we're factoring that 15% for the net safe yield. And you can see it bumps it up. Without doing an annual water audit, I discovered that with the turnover, when John Farron's a predecessor public works director left in 2013, the water audit was not being done. So we're going to try to catch up on that, where it shows every year the unavailable water use. It spikes up when you have water main breaks, and it spikes up, when you do more flushings that year. So, but what we found is that the safe yield can be found at 15% is a good number to use, because some years it's 8%, some years it might be 20 due to breaks in the line. So you use 85%, and then you bump these numbers up to get your net safe yield. And you can see in the early years we were trending a lot higher on our water use side, but it's been going down over time. And right now it's going back up a little bit. But again, this is a little bit of a cheater number. I discovered this morning that we were including raw water in our numbers on the top line. So I need to back out, the 10 to 40 acre feet that our vineyard and RLS are using from lower res. But we've been showing below the net safe yield that the safe yield committee put together.
Ms. Smithies, what's the asterisk, please, on 2019-20?
That's just a forecast. We just threw it because we know we've been trending higher each month. If you follow the monthly reports for production online, it shows we've been trending up the last several months from the year before.
And when's the last actual data that we have? What's the last actual monthly data?
It would be, this is demand, so it would be April. So we'll get the meter reads were in May, so we'll get the next meter reads in July.
So May and June are guesses at this point, but through April we had this sort of 1572.
No, that's the number I added in. It's lower than that right now.
Right, but I'm sorry. So you guessed and then added the final 2 months to get to 1572.
Correct.
The projections were that we'd get 1572 this year. Got it. Okay. So the hotel savings were more than made up, it appears, from the fact that our town was full. Interesting.
Is there a value, and I'm just throwing this out, we did this the last time, we sort of pushed this conversation thinking we'd be here now and have more clarity, but we still seem to be hovering in this sort of wondering which way to go here. Is there a value in waiting till July 14th to make the decision when maybe things will be more crystallized? Any thoughts from the council on that? I know this is a challenging middle area conversation. Any thoughts? Not yet, huh? Okay. There's two other parts of the conversation that are left for another day, but in terms of looking at the safe yield, I'm wondering if over the last decade, changes in the watershed, in what's being developed in the watershed above the reservoirs, pumping levels, perhaps siltation in the reservoir may affect that safe yield, those safe yield numbers. And then also there's a sort of a newer look at the connection between groundwater and surface water in hydro geology, more of a recognition of the connection. In Napa County, we've sort of always looked at these as two separate resources. The groundwater is prioritized to the county and ag, and the municipalities have been offered the surface water. But as we get deeper into science, we recognize that they're connected, and certainly with gravity that pulls water down, if a certain amount of groundwater is extracted below, then surface water will naturally sink. It's another conversation for another day, but it relates to this. The activity in the watershed, and also how we're defining the relationship between groundwater and surface water. It's a bigger conversation, but it relates. And it's hard to sometimes get clarity when you're talking about water and finance and water law all mixed together. But is there a thought that there's some more clarity that could come in the next 3 weeks? Ms. Smithies? Oh, Ms. Chateau?
I'm just curious, Councilmember Doring, have your thoughts changed as the conversation has progressed? Or are you still thinking that it would be good to go into a phase?
Well, as I sit here right now, I'm not confident in the numbers. I think we need to go back and get confident in the numbers. You said the raw water, we still have May and June. I would be inclined to hold a special meeting if we find out that those numbers have changed upward to get to 1,950 acre feet. I am concerned that we're waiting too long, but you're indicating that maybe your numbers need to be worked on a little bit more. So I'm at a loss.
I don't have the right numbers in front of me to make a decision. I was just reading the staff report, and now the comments you've made have given me slight amount of more comfort, but not much. We're going to have to go into phase one. I guarantee you it's just a matter of when. You have these 2 months have probably brought us very close to it, if not over it, even with the raw water usage that backed out. I don't know. I just don't think it makes sense to wait. I think we're too close to it to wait.
So, Mr. Doring, Vice Mayor Doring, do you believe, I mean, this is the hottest and most water intensive time of the year, right? At least for landscaping. So is there a benefit to show our situation to our residents by declaring one, knowing that there's also pain associated by declaring one, rather than, this is the dog days of summer, right? Or will be, and time to show, right? I don't know.
In my opinion, as Vice Mayor Doring says, we're going to be moving into this. And do we make the decision tonight? Are we there with everybody that it's time? If not tonight, is it a special meeting coming up? If we get a little more clarity on the numbers, a special meeting or on the 14th of July, will that give us the clarity? This is, I guess, where we're trying to settle here. Ms. Koberstein.
Yeah, I remember we don't have a meeting in the second half of July, and a lot of our staff will be on a well-deserved vacation. I think we need to review what the phase one restrictions are. People can still water. It regulates the time of day and night that you're doing it. You can't water if it has rained, within a couple of days. So the regulations are not that restrictive. It's just a good reminder to people to be extra careful. I do think we're going to get there eventually. So it's a question of whether we push it down the road a little bit, demand strict adherence to the code, and wait and pull the trigger, in early August or something.
Well, we have the early meeting in July that we could use as our marker, and at that point we should have at least one level more clarity. At that point, how do people feel about using that meeting to make the determination?
Excuse me.
Yes, please, Mr.
I would just like to know what new data we would have at that meeting if we're going to spend time on it. Will there be enough new data by then?
Ms. Smithies?
And what data are you talking about? Just backing out the raw water from the current numbers? Is that?
And getting a sense of our usage at that point.
And finding out May and June's usage. Okay.
Will we have that by July 14th?
We'll try. I believe the meter reads are done on the 8th, if I'm correct. I'm looking to.
How is the council's comfort level on making the decision on that day?
Mayor,
are we ready?
Mayor, I would recommend that we not have that meeting on July 8th, but instead either act tonight or bring you back information on the 14th. And that's partly based on what Erica said with respect to the meter reads. If we have reads done on the 8th, we'll have better data for you on the 14th of July.
Yes,
and
that was the data.
And that will avoid the need for a special meeting as well.
Yeah, I was suggesting the 14th, yeah. How do we feel about that? Are we okay with that as a council on the 14th of July, making the determination with this additional data? Or do we want to move now? Is there an instinct from somebody where we are? I'm okay waiting. You're ready to move?
I am.
I'm ready to move.
Okay. I'll support that as well. Any thought as we go forward here, Mr. Knudsen, Ms. Cindy?
I need a motion to continue the meeting past 9.
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Silverstein? Koberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like we've got consensus, and so do we have a motion in turn? Oh, are you looking for direction tonight, Mr. Presswich, or do we need a motion?
Well, I'm unclear what you have direction on, because I wasn't clear on whether we're moving forward with the phase 1 or bringing this back on the 14th.
I'm supporting Vice Mayor Doring and Ms. Chateau in moving forward with the phase 1 starting today.
Okay.
I agree.
So we just need direction. Is that accurate, Erica? That's right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I think we should continue to update you on numbers. So what I would anticipate is wanting to bring you a report on the 14th with additional data from the reads that we do that we're anticipating on July 8th.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Vice Mayor Doring, for your instinct and judgment on that. So with that, we will then move forward. We will go to item 10.4. This is the presentation of the revised 2021-2030 General Fund Long Range Financial Forecast, and this is our Finance Director, Ms. Mitz.
Great, thank you. I will share my screen. So as the mayor indicated, this is the new scenarios for the long-range financial forecast as requested by the City Council at the May 14th budget workshop. So at the May 14th budget workshop, there were 5 different long-range financial forecast scenarios that were presented. And again, these scenarios are for illustrated purposes. So it's definitely not a budget. It's just a forecasting tool to give the council idea of what our long-term trajectory is using different models. So the 5 models that we did on May 14th was a baseline. It was a baseline with storm drain maintenance, a baseline with storm drain maintenance, and a new hotel in fiscal year 25. And then the next 2 scenarios were the baseline storm drain maintenance, and then also utilizing option 1 and option 2 as identified in the infrastructure task force report. The feedback that night on the draft long-range financial forecast was to add additional scenarios utilizing these 5 bullet points as the basis. Most of them actually didn't change what we had already done. It basically took information that we had embedded on the back side of the report and bringing it to the very front, to the front portion of the summary page, so council and the public could more accurately see where changes were made due to the storm drain maintenance as well as new revenues. So the first item that was asked was the sale of the city-owned asset to be shown as revenue line item that's added to the general fund balance as opposed to just going over to the CIP project. The next item was to show the model with revenue line items. So again, individual line items based on when a new hotel came online and how that affects the property tax, sales tax, and TOT. Show separate line item for storm drain repairs. Remove the debt service line because that would assume that we were taking on debt where the council really wanted to get a better idea of what would the cash fund balance look like with these various illustrations. And then model 2 hotels. So the first is Farmstead because that's the furthest along in development. So we kept that modeling it as going online in fiscal year 25. And then we also modeled the hotel in option 2, which produces the most amount of revenues. And that really, again, gives an idea for illustration where your extremes are, the highest revenues, versus, what our current forecast is looking like with a hotel that's closest to being online. So what this did is it actually added 3 new scenarios to it. So what we presented in the revised long-range financial forecast was scenario 1 was the baseline.
Scenario 2 is a baseline with a hotel in 24-25, which is modeled on Farmstead. Scenario 3 is a baseline with a hotel in 24-25, which again is Farmstead. And then the second hotel going online the following year in 25-26. And it was modeled on option 2 of the ITF report, which produced the most amount of revenues. And then also scenario 3 added modeled the sale of a city-owned asset. So what this looked like is scenario 1. You can see here the only change to the scenario 1 in the baseline is we added the storm drain repairs as a separate line item. So it started in fiscal year 23 going through fiscal year 30. So, and that was the only change from the only change was that, as well as the beginning fund balance. We modeled that off of what the proposed budget document was. So here you can see in summary in scenario 1, your unassigned net position, where it drops to, and the actual use of general fund reserves, or the projected use of general fund reserves in this illustration. So the next scenario, again, what this did is it added the storm drain repairs as a line item 9 here. And then for the revenues, this is modeling Farmstead Hotel going online in fiscal year 24-25. So you can see incrementally where the property tax increase would be. It would be starting in fiscal year 26. And then it just follows the same projections as all the other models do for the property tax increase per year, which is, I believe, a 3.5%. Sales tax, you can see the increased sales tax year over year. The reason why you see the increase here is because we modeled the same increase as our other sales tax projections were in the baseline. And then the increased TOT. So here you can see the first year we factored 50% occupancy, and then ramping up to what they modeled, what the ITF modeled, which I believe is the 70 or 75% occupancy for Farmstead in the following years. And again, it just bumps up a little bit each year based on the normal projection for TOT revenue increases. And so here you can see what the ending unassigned net position is. So you can see instead of it dropping down in the future years, just based on the one hotel alone, we're showing a much better reserve position. And then the final scenario was to add the hotel number 1 that's indicated here, that's Farmstead. Hotel number 2, that was adding with the highest, basically the highest revenue generating hotel for illustration purposes. And then it does show the sale of Adams Street property here. And again, it's illustrative purposes because Hotel 2, which is the highest net revenue hotel, is assumed to be built on the Adams Street property. So here you can see the one-time deposit, if it did sell for $20 million, to the total revenue line for the general fund. And so down at the bottom, you can again see what the net position is and then what the reserve balance is. So again, there's illustrative purposes for the council to be able to look at long-term financial planning, affordability of various city hall projects and infrastructure projects. And that concludes my very brief presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any initial comments or questions from council? Seeing none. Ms. Koberstein?
Yeah, I asked for a lot of these changes because I think it makes the forecast a little more useful for us going forward. I recognize it's a forecast and there are risks associated with it, but I mostly wanted to pull out the fact that we were going to take whatever money came in and we were going to put it right into the CIP projects. I think what this kind of forecast does is it really shows us how much excess cash or whatever you want to call it we may have. And then we can make the decision of where it's going to go. Make a better informed decision, and it may go to things other than city buildings, as Vice Mayor Doring mentioned, I think the last meeting or the one before, that perhaps some of it would be reallocated to the Housing Trust Fund or something. So thanks for doing this. I think it's a little easier for me to follow anyway.
Is there any other additional council comment or question? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Ms. Nixon if anybody in the public that has public comment.
I'm looking right now to see if we have any members of the public who want to speak, and I'm not seeing any.
Okay, thank you. And I'll bring back to the council a few comments. Are there comments or questions from the council? So thank you for this. And I think, looking out into the future, it's very important considering what our revenue will be. I have some concerns that we're looking very narrowly at one revenue source, which is hotel development. I think we're, recognizing that we're in the North Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, there's an opportunity for some economic diversification. And recently, I shared with the council a report that had been put out on economic diversification in Healdsburg by a gentleman named Robert Eiler, who's a professor at Sonoma State, looking at different mixes that can give a kind of diversification that it goes to that sort of not putting all your eggs in one basket. And the idea that we can create sort of different revenue generators that could give us more resilience, particularly in situations where visitation is down. As we've seen, actually, St. Helena we have some diversity right now, which keeps us at about a 50% dependence on visitation, where some other cities have a much higher dependence. And therefore, in the absence of visitation, they're hit much harder. So I think as we talk about long-range financial forecasts, looking at how we can possibly diversify. I actually have a Zoom meeting set up with Professor Eiler in the next week or two, and to learn more. And one of the things he did say, I had a conversation with him, having the presence of institutions of learning. We have a number with the Napa Valley College, PUC, and the CIA, and also the hospital medical industry that already exists here. There's some opportunities we may want to look at for some diversification of revenue in our long-term financial forecast. And also, if we look out, extending out to 2030, that's also this climate goal in terms of carbon drawdown. So is there a way to balance our development that may be more climate friendly? It's not all dependent on one industry. So it's just a thought that as we look at a long-range forecast, we sort of include some of these. And I'll have more information after my Zoom meeting with Mr. Eiler, and it'll be in the next week or so. Mr. Doring.
I tend to agree that there may be some room for diversification, but I'm concerned that we have urgent needs. And in my perspective, over 75% of our employees are traveling into town. Why are they traveling into town to work in our industries? Because they can't afford to live here. So we can talk about diversification, and that will be a good thing. We have to balance it out, but we have an obligation to build affordable housing. And so folks who say, well, no development, no this, no that, have to come up with a plan B in a more urgent manner. So we have to look at urgent needs, midterm needs, and then long-term needs. So until someone says that diversification can deliver affordable housing to our employees now, then we have to come up with some other ideas along the way. So we get to that point eventually, but climate change is urgent. We can't afford to wait till 2030 to have diversification ramp up. So we have to do a number of things to that point, right? There's no indication that diversification can be an immediate fix for the urgencies that we face. Climate change, housing for our employees. So I would just urge us to keep our perspective open, but also recognize the urgencies that we face. So I'm agreeing with you, but I'm feeling a little bit more compelled to do some things now, try to find a plan B for the revenue. And to this day, nobody has come up with a plan B for revenue. And I've been waiting for 2 years for that. So until there's a plan B, we need to focus in on this. This is extremely urgent for us. I'll yield.
Thank you. Ms. Chateau?
Vice Mayor Doreen, I so appreciate those comments because I see the climate change question as being so much bigger. And there's so much more that we can do with the open space and the walking paths and making our city more bike friendly. And some of these bigger issues on how do we address our climate change issues when we have money to be able to invest in it, even just on the small level with staff and having resources for it. And I'm very interested, as Vice Mayor Doreen spoke about, the whole picture, affordable housing, how do we have money to increase these projects? And we don't have that right now. So thank you very much for saying that.
But if more projects come in, then we would need more housing, and more projects have more water and waste management issues that tie into the climate issues. So I think it's a big, complex conversation that we're in the middle of, which is good. Ms. Koberstein?
Yeah, I don't think we should underestimate the ability of people who are building things, no matter what it is, to adjust to the imperatives of climate change and make changes. Certain industries are further along than others. And, I just think we have to be realistic and specific. And, people are not going to just stop building. We're going to have better means of conserving water, reusing water. Going forward, you have to at least have the imagination to believe that we're going to be able to innovate in part to get through this. And we're also going to enact more stringent regulations that people are required to live with. So I'm looking forward to our goal setting because I think, one part of our general plan that we haven't focused on much in our work program is the climate section, climate change.
Very good. Any further comments? Seeing none. And did we opened it to public comment? So if there's further public comment, that can be submitted by mail because we need to move on in this meeting. I did open and close it. So we'll move on now to our next item, which is, sorry about this, folks. I just had a.
Aren't we back at the dam?
Yes. So we are now at our
11.
final item this evening, and this is 11.2. This is discussion and direction on a proposal made by Water Audit California to film the construction and post-construction of the CIP project number W-26 Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement. And this again is Ms. Smithies.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. So during an update, I think it was last week with Mr. McKinnon, who's on the line to talk about this item as well. He proposed doing still photos and time-lapse video of the beginning of construction, before construction, all the way through post-monitoring the long-term range of the restoration of Upper York Creek. Since it's such a specialized project, and there are some concerns in the city as far as, how do you do releases and how does that work with our construction crews? Our consultant does have a minimal scope of work to do some video, like one video, time-lapse video of the creek restoration. But the Water Audit California wants to take the next step forward with additional and really showcase this project and the restoration. It's a rare project, and just showing the restoration of the York Creek. And he's here to talk about it more. But what we need direction on is how do we pursue this? We do have a film permit process already in place, but do we want to add additional edits in there? Kara Ueda and I discussed this item. We also discussed it with Mr. McKinnon on separate occasions, and I want to bring it to council for further discussion and feedback, and I'll let Mr. McKinnon speak as well.
Would you like to have him? I'll have council questions and comments first, and then I'll open it for the public comment. Ms. Koberstein?
I just have two comments. First of all, I do have some concerns about whether this is going to interfere at all with the work. We are on a very tight schedule to complete this project. And maybe that's something that can be worked out with greater specifications and control than the form that's in front of us tonight. Secondly, I do think that this is a record of this happening is useful for educational purposes and the like. If it happens, I would like to see, some of that come to the city that maybe then belongs to the Historical Society or is part of the library, and can be a learning experience for people here and part of our history, without charge. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Additional council comment or question? So I will then open the public comment, and Ms. Nixon, we have some public comment, it appears, and Mr. McKinnon on the line.
Yeah, let me unmute him.
Mayor Ellsworth, Council, thank you very much. As you might have gathered, I get quite excited about the potentials of this project you're doing. I think it is much bigger than the small size of it. I think it is truly inspirational. And Water Audit and the Refugia Project, we aren't film producers, we aren't documentarians. We just see something here that is history in the making, that is really important. And if no one else will do it, we will step up to do it because we strongly believe it should be done. I was in construction for many years myself before entering the legal career. I can say that one of the first things we wanted to do was attend the first safety meeting on the job, because every job I've ever been in always starts with the first safety meeting. And we want to talk to the contractor and to the engineers and get out of everybody's way and be absolutely clear that we are not going to in any way, shape, or form impair the project or put anyone at risk. And yes, of course, this is a public project. It's your community, and it would seem to me to be unreasonable to say that you shouldn't have access to the images of your own work. Exactly how this is all going to work out, I don't know. But if you tell staff, they're very competent and pleasant people, and we can work it out and get back to you as quickly as possible. The project's almost ready to start, so we don't have much time. But I guess the truth of the matter is, it's just something that's beautiful and wonderful, and it should be recorded, and someone should do it. And if no one else will, well, we'll step up and get it done.
Thank you. Oh, so let me just, I'll just see if, do we have a question, Mr. Doring, for Mr. McKinnon?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, Mr. McKinnon, will you be using this video to promote your work in the industry that I think you said was either bleak or black? I didn't catch that, but I agree with your characterization of your industry. I'm just curious whether it's going to be a promotional tool for the litigation work you do throughout the state of California.
Well, actually, we have two arms. On one side, yes, we do litigation. But on the other side, in the Refugia Project, what we are doing is assembling information and making it accessible and actionable to people like yourselves. And if you go to the refugiaproject.org, you'll find the York Dam. You'll find our pictures of it, our assessment of it, but you will also find the other 58 obstructions that are in the Napa Valley, that if you can remediate those 58, actually 57, now that you passed the resolution this evening, you will have unencumbered waterways, and in our view at least, you will have harmony with beneficial users and the environment. So the answer to the question is it will be used in the Refugia Project to demonstrate how this can be done without conflict and litigation. And in order to better explain that, I would suggest you go to waterauditca.org. And if you weren't at the forum, Mayor Ellsworth was, but if you weren't at the forum, take a look at the forum, and it will show you how what we're trying to do with this project is to set aside litigation and only use that as an absolute last resort. And I think your own experience is that we aren't, yes, we see litigation as a necessary component of accomplishing environmental remediation. It's already been discussed many, many times this evening that we must do this. That is not something we have an option to do. But what you're doing with York Dam, I see as being representative of something that is much bigger and much more important and much more capable of inspiring others. And I can't see it as being some sort of advertising promotion for litigation business. As a matter of fact, I think it'd be a promotion for a business that doesn't litigate.
So I'd like to ask a question. Is this, if something was put together, is this something that the city of St. Helena could review to feel comfortable about something going out with our name on it like this? Is this something that would be open for that sort of discussion?
I think that your council and I should have a very wide-ranging conversation, and we should have a list of things that you should have brought to you as discussion points or bullet points for your consideration in an orderly manner. I think everything's open for discussion. I think what typically we do is put things.
Mr. McKinnon, I have to call a motion. I have to call a motion to extend the meeting here. We're coming up to 9:30. Do we want to stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes and wrap this up, folks? Council, how do we feel there? Is there a motion to continue the meeting for another 10 minutes?
So moved. 10.
10. So we'll go to 9:40 at the latest. So is there a second? I'll second that. Yeah. Okay. So so this is the opening of a conversation. We're not making any decisions tonight, but we're just giving. If we did, we'd just be giving direction. That's my understanding.
Don't we have to vote, Mayor, on the extension?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, Mr. Knudsen. Roll call, please. I apologize.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Koberstein? Koberstein?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes. This is important.
So, do we have any thoughts from the council on allowing a conversation to see if there's something we might be interested in? And I think Mr. Doring makes excellent points. We want to make sure that what we're talking about is something that is a benefit to the city and something we would be proud of, that would be used in a way that we would be proud of. So we'd want to be sure of that. Ms. Koberstein?
I'd like to ask Erica to remind us of when this project would start, assuming everything, not the filming, but when we would be, you had that great timeline up of the work on the York Creek Dam. Work is expected to begin fairly soon, correct?
Correct. Pretty straightforward. Probably, we want to try, also I didn't mention it, but we're trying to have a groundbreaking ceremony, hopefully the first full week in July, because before they actually get actively in there, they're mobilizing trailers. We're having a pre-con Thursday. We're trying to get out there as soon as possible. We got a green light from the Army Corps to start some of the non-excavation, getting out there on site so far. So, I mean, as soon as we get hit hard running, we're going to be there in July.
is there any, I'm going to see if there's any additional, I didn't close the public comments, so we're sort of in a mixed conversation here, but let me take it back to public comment. Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I just want to see if there's any additional public comment out there. Ms. Nixon, are you seeing any?
I don't see any additional public comment, but Mr. McKinnon does have his hand raised again.
Okay, so if there's a thought, yes, we'll accept that.
Okay, I'll unmute him.
I think that the comments you're concerned about the well-being of your community, the image of your community is completely and understandable. And to the extent that you perceive Water Audit as a litigation organization, I can understand that concern as well. Having put together the forum images, which are on our website now, I can tell you that there are 3 data sources, 3 cameras, and if I'd had 4, I would have been happier. What we need to do is collect raw data, raw information, and there will be a great deal more raw information than will ever be seen by the public. So exactly who has access to that raw data and what use it can be put to, I think is part and parcel of any film deal, I suppose. But what I would ask is that there is only going to be one time that the first pickup truck drives onto that job site. And I want a film crew, or I want a camera person there catching that first person getting out of their truck for the first time on that job. So, I mean, I think we could even say, let's just make a deal to assemble the data to get the information, and we can almost worry about what we're going to do with it later. But let's not let, it's like missing the moment of childbirth. If you aren't there, you've missed it and it's gone forever. And that's what we have here now. And there's something it's often said that a well-managed watershed is like a unicorn. Everybody knows what it should look like, but no one's ever seen one. And what we have here is something, it is turning from an environmental embarrassment into something that is going to be something to be proud of and show, and your community will be known for it. And we just want to get all of that experience recorded so that it isn't lost. And however we have to get to a temporary agreement so that we can do that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so let's see where we are, Mr. Knudsen.
So what we could do, pending anything else, is we could do an agreement that basically the city owns the footage. And then we can give rights to others. I just hate to see it sort of commercialized, honestly, but I do see there's value.
And if the city controls the footage, then we can make the determination or in terms of the process. Ms. Koberstein, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I mean, my gut just tells me this is not the right thing to do to complicate this project right now. As I understand it, we are going to have some record of what went on and some of the progress through our own contractor. And I've just got concerns about the time it would take to hammer this agreement out and, take time to do that. I'm reluctant, to entertain the idea myself.
Is there a process by which the oversight coming from the indigenous people could include photography? So if there's photography coming from the process through either the company doing it or the oversight from the indigenous people, that we could collect the photography that way. So I get where Ms. Koberstein coming from. It's already a very complex project. but I also think there's a great value to this. Ms. Smithies?
Well, we already have, our consultant already has like one camera they were planning to put up. I mean, I'm just wondering if there's some way to, if I don't know how the value of these cameras, if the control was to our consultant, our project management team, and then if we can come to some agreement with sharing that data later. I mean, my concern is also release the liability of all those, you know, if they're going to use this as a documentary, how are they going to get releases from all the employees and construction and project management? But that's another whole discussion. But my thought, like, the ease of process was if there's some way for not going through our contractor, but maybe go through our consultant who already is going to be doing something, but they only have the one camera.
And well, maybe that's a discussion of perhaps adding a camera or two to the process so there's more footage caught and then can be compiled later. At least that way it captures what Mr. McKinnon is saying. It's a moment in time that we should be proud of. But I also do recognize there's a lot of complications. Before we run out of time, I do want to say this again, in terms of celebrating the indigenous people whose land this was, and they are of this land. Governor Newsom last year was very clear in saying that we need to recognize the need for healing of these past traumas. There may be a part in here of working with the indigenous people to come to some place where we move that forward as well. So where are we feeling like maybe the conversation goes to the consultant next to see if they could add some cameras and maybe that would give us the footage that could later be used? Does that sound like a middle path? Ms. Chateau?
It's hard for me to support the camera idea without knowing what they cost and the time, and can we do that? I think it's important that we do control the data. So no matter what, I want to mark the moment and make sure we have some images with the one camera for sure, because this is a momentous event. I am uncomfortable with it being used with a company for the litigation, that part. It would be so much easier if this was an independent person asking us for this than this situation.
Erica, could we find from the consultant maybe the cost of adding a camera, what that would be?
I can do that. I was thinking if California Water wanted to provide the cameras to the consultant, there was some trust there, and then we controlled the footage. But because I don't think the city should incur more costs on this. That's your decision. But I know the consultant is very excited to monitor this project, and then the post monitoring is very important as well, because it'll be interesting when we first get our first rainfall when this is post construction is complete.
Ms. Chateau?
I'm comfortable with that as long as we have control.
Why don't we just post some webcams high up in trees that have coverage, and and just take some have them take images every 10 seconds or every minute or something. I don't know. Okay, so we've got to come to a decision here. Anna, you were comfortable with water audits applying a camera as long as we control the image?
The content, yes.
The content, yeah.
I'm okay with that also.
Okay. I have a note from Cindy here. We need to revisit an item. Mr. Presswich? Oh, we need to vote on a
Once the council is finished with this item, we need to revisit one other item briefly.
Okay. So I'm going to open it very briefly for Mr. McKinnon to give us one last take here, and then let's figure out how to move forward. So, Mr. McKinnon, if you could keep it very brief.
I was going to say that what we had intended to do was put cameras in trees located where it would stay out of the way of the contractor, And as was suggested, every few seconds, I had take an image, only if there's movement. And obviously, we have to get releases for anybody whose first faces could be shown. And you know, I certainly have no objection whatsoever to open sourcing the images. That way, the entirety of it is, as you say, put on the web. You could watch it real time. Talk about the exciting thing to say. I mean, I would ask you to let your staff talk to me about this, and I understand your concerns. We can work it out.
So if that feels comfortable to have a conversation, knowing sort of the parameters that we're talking about, do we have consensus to allow a conversation to see if something can develop?
That's fine. I think under our code, the city manager has sole authority to make the decision. I'll give it to him, understanding the concerns we have about the usage of the data. If you could put that language in an agreement, I'm okay with that. That we get to control the use.
Mr. Toe?
And also that it doesn't get in the way of the project, like Councilmember Koberstein spoke about. Nothing can slow this down. We've got to keep moving.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I see
I guess I'm just not clear what the benefit is to us of doing it this way as opposed to what we had intended to do and putting our own cameras in the trees. I don't understand the benefit of involving the third party.
I think there's a financial component that, if I was hearing correctly, that they would incur rather than the city. That is my understanding. So does that give us enough to have a conversation happen? Mr. Presswich, do you feel you have?
Mr. Presswich is going on vacation.
It's guys, it's 9:43. We need another resolution.
That's why we have acting city managers. I think that with the assistance of the city attorney, we could update a version of a film permit that would include additional language, and the city attorney can work with our acting city manager.
Okay. It looks like we have a direction on that. Okay. So with that, thank you. We'll now move. Cindy has something that we need to circle back on.
Muted.
Mute, Cindy.
Item 10.3 does have a resolution to move us into phase 1. And so I'm just looking for a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Was that Mary? Was that Councilmember Koberstein? Okay.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. So with that, thank you very much. Unless there's nothing else to add, I appreciate the focus. I will adjourn the meeting, and we'll wish Mr. Presswich a good break from that. So thank you.
Much needed break. Please enjoy.
You'll get my list later on tomorrow.
No.
You won't find me too long at City Hall tomorrow, but I will be here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.
Bye.